Hopefully, we got it figured out. Did we ever figure? What are you laughing at already? Hey, welcome, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm Micah. That's Ashley. We're the two, and we have part one of teaching for edification tonight. That's what we're going to be doing today. This is one of the books that I talked about in the last week's fireside, the 2026 preview that I really wanted to get done this year, and this is a big one because this one's going to be combining a ton of work, a ton of things that have been produced over the years. Some of these we had to dig back to, and Ashley will correct me if I'm wrong, 2014 for some of this. So we were digging back to things that I had written back in 2014. Ashley was reading it and going, "What did you eat? What were you even saying here?" So I might be having to edit some of this as we go live. We'll see. We'll see. Okay. Now, do you want me to do an at everyone here? Oh my goodness. Okay, there it is. Okay, I've posted that into Discord, posted this everywhere. Now I'm going to close Discord. So if you message me on Discord, I will not get it for a couple hours. So it's 8:30. I'm probably gonna stop at like 10:30. I haven't decided where I'm gonna stop this. Um, you know what? You should probably see what I'm looking at. What do you think? Think that'd be a good idea? I forgot to share. So here's the document here, teaching for edification. That's better. Now you can actually see what I'm talking about here. I'm gonna zoom in. I'm gonna zoom in. Jeez, eat the food. Okay, so teaching for edification. Here we go. Teaching for edification. This is an integrating effort on my part of preaching my gospel. Um, but also just how to be a missionary. So this is this something that would be useful for those young, 12 to 16 preparing for a mission? I believe so. Is this something that would be useful for those going on a mission? I believe so. Is this useful for those who just want to be a better missionary, who just want to be a better teacher, who just want to learn how to be the best instrument in the Lord's hands they can be for these things? I'd say yes. I'd say yes to all of those. Um, is there also just some fun stuff in here that might be interesting to you, spiritually, uplifting? Maybe not so edifying, ironically enough. Maybe, I don't know, but definitely get a little fire in your bones. I hope so. We're integrating into this, or I'm integrating in the things that I wrote actually on my mission. So back in 2005 to 2007, there's the Sharpening the Sword series, which is something that I have been producing somewhat recently. There is the my missionary stories, my 20-part series on that, which is actually I'm gonna be going over in this as well. I mean, there is a ton of stuff that's integrated in this, and I'm not done with it, obviously, but I'm not going to get through this today. As you can see here, I'm scrolling down here. I got 67 pages, and I get down here to 68 down here, and this is when Sharpening the Sword would be integrated. So my 20-point series on Sharpening the Sword goes here. And so I'm on page 68, and Sharpening the Sword gets tacked in here. So um, this is a massive piece of work here. This is a massive piece of work here. But I think that I think I can get this done in, I think, two parts. I think what I'm gonna have to do, I want to redo my missionary stories in here. I might do the Sharpening the Sword again in here as well. We'll see. Um, but I'm gonna keep the Sharpening the Sword up. I'm gonna keep the my missionary stories up, but I'd like to have all this in one place as well, one reading of it. I won't include my two Pharisees walk into a bar jokes when I'm doing it here. But this is one of those things that it's going to be. This is one of those few things that's going to be like more of a like. This is a lifetime work for me. Like this is something that I've been putting together and trying to do for years now. Um, so hopefully it's useful to somebody. I know it was useful for me. I know it was all of this is a huge learning experience for me. Huge things gained. And my life experiences and abilities and so forth greatly altered based off of what I learned here and how I came about learning it. So with that said, let's get into this. Okay, so let's get into this. Okay, so teaching for edification here. To whom it may concern, now these are the parts that I wrote back in 2014 because I had actually started like in front of my teaching for edification series. Like I said, I wrote this back on my mission. And so this was back 2005 to 2007 to 2014, back in that time period when I was doing this. And so I was like, I knew I had this thing. Where is it, Ashley? And Ashley went looking and she's like, I can't believe I found it. Here it is. And so we tacked it in here. So I might be editing it. Here's the thing, if you find me insufferable today, you are probably going to find me extremely insufferable in 2014. And so I've gotten better, believe it or not. As crazy as that is to believe. And so I might be editing this a little bit as I go. Check the version number at the top, right? This says version 1.00, but what I'm reading here today won't be I won't be making this public until I'm actually done with the Teaching for Edification book. And so don't ask for the papers for this yet because this is not going to be available until I'm actually done with it completely. But the first bit of this is done here. So this, to whom it may concern here, I wrote a little intro here. This guide and everything in it was written. I'm calling it a guide here, which I think would be, you know, still the correct thing. It's a book, but it's like it's really what I view as a guide. Like this is something that's going to help you on your journey in this regard. Compiled and explained by Micah T. English, unless otherwise quoted, which I really do a good job, I think, of making sure I quote other people pretty well. I personally do not believe anyone should profit from writing anything related to gospel principles. Hey, this hasn't changed my whole life, as I personally know that to be priestcraft. Ah, look at that. At least, if nothing else, I've been consistent for my whole life. I find that even in the church, you will find prominent. Oh man, this got worse. This has gotten worse since 2005 to 2014. I'll tell you that right now. You'll find prominent LDS writers who make a living off of expounding doctrine that should be free for all. You will not find myself selling anything you find in this guide anywhere. As such, this guide and anything else I write concerning gospel principles is totally free. Any questions or requests can be sent directly to me at insert my email address here. You know what? I don't even care. It's still there. You want to email me, be my guest, because Ashley checks the email, not me. So send all your complaints and hate mail her direction. With that said, don't reproduce anything in this guide to sell, and especially be certain to not take credit for anything found in this guide. That would be plagiarism on a celestial scale. Don't be found doing this, or it will not be well with you at judgment, especially since I'm providing it free of charge. If you wish to use anything in this guide, feel free to, without even asking me. Just please quote the guide and the website while you do so. Right? No plagiarism. May God bless you in his work. Well, I guess I haven't really changed much since 2014. Um, maybe I haven't grown as much as I thought I have, because that sounds very similar. Overview and purpose here. So what is the overall purpose of this guide? We have preached my gospel, right? Isn't that enough? The answer, absolutely. However, here are my observations being a lifelong member and serving a successful mission. We will get into what really having a successful mission, uh, we'll get into what really having a successful mission is, means in the guide. So that I'm already afraid for what I'm going to say there. That's going to upset people. And being one of the very first groups to actually start and end its mission with Preach My Gospel, and I will say repeatedly throughout this that Preach My Gospel has changed throughout time, and I make those when there are changes, I make those clear in this. But I will say, and this will offend people, Preach My Gospel has only gotten worse over time. And I'm really grateful that the church to this day continues to have the older versions of Preach My Gospel on their website as well. So you can go and actually check the older versions of the Preach My Gospel on the website. They haven't fried them, so they're still up there. And so I prefer greatly the older Preach My Gospels, which focused on teaching skills and were very bold in its language and so forth. A lot of the new Preach My Gospels are like, please don't look at porn on your mission, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is so sad. Um, but anyway, that's just the way it is. That's just how things have changed, and so this whole book series, the whole thing is not written for like people who are struggling with their emotions or depression or things like that, right? And I think a lot of Preach My Gospel now and a lot of things now are like, geared in that direction. Nah. This is a series written for the wheat. This is a series written for those who are moving forward, right? And so hopefully people just understand that. Um my gospel is the backbone of my mission, right? 2005 to 2007, that's when I served. It also having the blessing to serve in one of the greatest missions on the planet. I know, everyone says that about their missions, don't they? But mine actually was. I think I'm hilarious. I almost wish I'd still talk like this all the time. Uh, Hey, you know what? Doug would agree with me on this, though. Doug would agree with me on this. He's a second witness for this. Mine actually, he served like, I don't even know, a few years before me. Just a few. Mine actually was, I'll explain why I believe that to be the case, why that is in a sec, which also has me worried for the future. First, here are my observations. Okay, one, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints exhibit confirmation bias more than most. This keeps many from accepting simple truths even when they are right there in front of them on the pages. Ouch. This is part of the five things I wish the Latter Day Saints would know and learn. Probably this is what spawned that in the next couple years. Political correctness has crept into the church. My goodness, has it? This is crazy. It's like this is almost prophetic. This has gotten way worse as a whole and has blurred once clear doctrines. Man, I just talked about this today. This is past tense for a lot of this stuff. This keeps many from ever hearing the simple truths of the gospel because of the fear of offending even in the church. Well, and here I am afraid that I'm going to offend reading me. Isn't that ironic? That's how much things have changed. Um, Most members enjoy talking or meetings, while most now shun hard work, doctrine, and inviting. Wow. And man, I don't, I, it's like and just talking about the fear of offending, it's so crazy because like I'm already at a point in time where I want to say something, but it's like I'm afraid of offending people, right? And it's like I'm not even trying to be mean, but it's like we can see how service missions have exploded and how this has so drastically changed just in the time from 2005, 2007, 2014 to today. This is so different the way it is. This has created an atmosphere that now associates everything that is hard with the group not effective, while everything that is quote unquote smart is paired now with the group the future. Simply put, the learned now think they are wise without any experience. Four, members of the church have heard, continue to hear, and will continue to be taught and invited, and yet most don't or won't listen. This is not as much an observation as it is simply a fact. Elder Oaks, when talking of the 10 virgins, taught that 50% of the endowed and active members of the church would not be ready when the Lord returns. Not so much, I don't we have to quote Elder Oaks on that. That's pretty much a observation on that. And this is due to the fact that once again, the virgins had temple clothes on, they had the wedding garments on, and they all heard the call go out. So they must have been active, right, to hear the call, and they must have been at least endowed to have the garments. So I ask how many members are active and how many of them are endowed, and then you take that number and you divide it by two, and you're starting to get an idea of what's going on here. Because of these and many other observations, I have found that many are kept from the truth because they know not where to find it. And this is only getting worse with priestcraft exploding like it is and the precepts of men and so forth. And that is because those with the truth don't recognize the truth, even if it hits them square in the face. Man, I was so mean. What I hope to be able to provide in this guide is a foundation that my son, will someday be able to use with regards to preach my gospel. That made Ashley make a noise behind me. The most important duty of members of Christ's church. I also hope to be able to give others who happen to be lost, even in the church, kept from the truth because they just don't know where to find it, some simple truth centered answers that will help them mesh doctrine with action and be able to put preach my gospel into action. Ah, you know what? My our sons are the Joseph boys. Good call, Ashley. Good call. Doug already gave me a thumbs up. Well, there you go. Okay, so I have an about myself section here, and Ashley said this is going to hurt some people's feelings. So I was like, oh my goodness. I wrote this a long time ago. Okay, so I said, I'm sure by now, if you have read to this point, you assume I'm a prideful person. Don't worry, I don't blame you. In fact, most members are ignorant to the meaning. I struggle. I have weaknesses. I have such weaknesses that I, like Nephi, have cried out in my life, wretched man that I am. I am, however, the humblest man I have ever had the chance to meet. And man, should I say that's actually been more confirmed to me over time? Would that be even worse? That's one of the things that, like, my goodness. And now, how can you say that? I already know where this because I understand what the definition of pride is. I understand what the definition of humble is, right? And I'm not prideful. How can you say that? That makes you the proudest man I've ever heard of. Well, if that's the case, if you do feel that way, I can tell you that it is most certainly due to your own ignorance on the subject of humility and pride. I knew where I was going with this. In the church today, most associate, I am such a horrible person. I suck so bad. Cry, 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 with humility. When in fact, that is pride. The correct understanding of humility is understanding where your power comes from. Ashley said she read this. Like Ammon in the Book of Mormon, who boasted that he could do all things if the Lord commanded him. Many thought that he was being prideful, when in fact he was displaying the complete opposite, his complete humility. A humble man of himself knows that he is weak, can do very little in the scope of things by himself, but that he can in fact do all things with the Lord. When you belittle yourself, tear yourself down, and otherwise make yourself smaller at the pulpit, at fast and testimony meeting, or any other time, what you are in fact saying is, Christ does not have the power to change me, and I am too prideful of a person to change and ask the Lord two or four. Well, I can't change because Ashley's clicked in here. The power to change. It, however, shows that you are a prideful person. As President Benson said in his famous talk, Beware of Pride, too often we view pride as a thing with people on the top looking down, when the reality is that there is a far more predominant pride, that of people on the bottom looking up. And I paraphrase it there. You can look at the talks Beware of Pride. With that said, please don't read my words and judge me to be a prideful person, and thus miss all the messages. I can assure you, as the Lord liveth, that I am an imperfect man with serious faults, but pride was never one. I am a man like Nathaniel of old, without guile, and I will say things pretty matter of factly. This is not because I believe myself to be a better person or others to be worse human beings. I say them because I believe them to be true and to believe them to be truth. And I, with all my heart, believe only the pure truth will ever set you free. The wicked take the truth to be hard, while the righteous take truth, even the hard truths of the gospel, to heart with gladness and humility. With that said, I ask the question, why should you listen to me? Or why should you read this? Which is a valid question which needs to be addressed. I am not a prophet. I am not your mission president. If the prophet of God tells you to jump, and in this guide somewhere I have said jumping doesn't work, disregard my statement. Times change, things progress. A prophet of God is there because things change. The doctrine doesn't, but procedure does. Policy versus doctrine. And if procedure changes, follow the prophet. To a smaller degree, everything about a prophet could be likened unto your mission president. He holds the keys over your mission, and as such, the complete responsibility to either exalt or condemn himself in the process. Listen to him, even if it doesn't make sense. The Lord will bless you as you do this, and if he is doing things incorrectly, he will be condemning himself. If you, however, do not listen to him, even if he is telling you to do things incorrectly, you'll be condemning yourself in the process. You want further on that? Read the story of Saul and David. So, yes, I'm not the prophet. I'm not your mission president. And we are told in Doctrine and Covenants that you are not to command those at your head. So, what is this guide? Well, in the same chapter in Doctrine and Covenants, it says that those with the gift of wisdom are required to and obligated to share that wisdom with all, including those that are at the head. This guide is just that, wisdom. Take it or leave it. There are no commands in here, but I can promise you, as the Lord promised me, that I do have the gift of wisdom, and many things I have seen and learned can and will benefit you if you let them. A brief history of parts of my life that I feel might help give credibility or credentials to the guide. In my mission prep letter that came from Philadelphia, yes, I served in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, mission 2005 to 2007. Now, I don't know if this is the same anymore. There used to be these things called letters, and they came in the mail. They came in things called envelopes, and there was words on them. But you would get your mission call. Everyone's familiar with that. You open it. I'm sure they still do that because, Latter-day Saint moms want to make a movie out of it and turn it into something bigger and that it shouldn't be done for. But I digress. I'm sure they still have the letter. For that reason alone, Latter-day Saint women would never let that stop. But they also used to give you a letter. The mission president would also send a letter from the mission. So like I'd get my mission call from to Philadelphia, and then like a couple weeks later or a month later, I'd get a letter from the current mission president that was in Philadelphia, and in it they would tell you things like, you know, if you went to Winnipeg, for example, it's like it's really cold here. Like it says this, but you need boots that are gauged for this sort of temperature and blah 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 blah. So like they would give you advice specific to their mission that you might not be getting in that letter so that you could go and purchase these things and do these things before you like went on your way to the MTC and so forth. So anyway, I got this letter from Philadelphia. It was actually from the mission president that I wasn't even serving with. So my mission president came in and then I came in, so I never got the letter from him. I don't know if I say that here. But so this letter didn't even come from my mission president. I served my entire 2 years with the same mission president, and so this letter came from the mission president before I was there. So in this letter, it told me that if I served faithfully, and I remember, I'll never forget this. And I have the letter buried somewhere in my journals, but I can never forget this because I just couldn't believe this. Both my parents are converts. I am not. I always say I'm a convert whenever I say this for some reason online. I'm not. Both my parents are converts. I was born in the church. My parents did not serve missions. And so, like, this was just really shocking to me when I read this. But in this letter, this mission president told me that if I served faithfully on my mission, that I could expect to bring 2 souls into the gospel in my mission services. That was what I guess the average for baptisms was for 2 years for the Philadelphia mission, as this was the average baptisms per missionary. I'm glad to say that this letter from the previous mission president, okay, so I did say this, was not how my mission was going to turn out. Our mission was compared to European missions as far as cost, converts, numbers, and overall faith. Like, so it was the highest expensive mission. So each mission had like how expensive it was to rent and the food and yada yada yada. Europeans were some of the most expensive. It had some of the lowest convert numbers, and so forth. And faith, like of the overall members, like the activity rates, how many members there were. Like Philadelphia was compared to European missions. It didn't. Philadelphia didn't have a temple at the time, and so forth. And so like it was compared to like you're serving in a European mission. The numbers were terrible, and nothing was going right. While serving, I personally witnessed our convert baptisms double, then triple, and by the end, we were baptizing more than 1,500 people in a single year. That was more than 8 times what we originally were doing. When Preach My Gospel came out, the church leadership was expecting floodgates of new converts all over the planet. This, however, was not the case. In fact, there was only a handful of missions worldwide that saw this kind of an increase. And by handful, there was only 2 in all of North America that saw any increase. And we were one of them. Now, how do I know? Because they told us. Well, they were telling us. Who? The apostles themselves. As we were starting to see massive increases across the board in our mission, we started to have Area 70 show up more and more in our mission. Then we started to see apostles show up, all for the same purpose. They were trying to figure out what our mission was doing right. You see, they were only looking at one number, convert baptisms, and based off of that number alone, they were flooding our mission in the United States to try to figure out what we were doing right. So right off the bat, you should be able to start to understand from this that convert baptisms, at least in the eyes of the brethren, meant doing something right. And lack of convert baptisms equals doing something wrong or not doing something right. The first questions were always typically the same. Why? Followed by how. The why was easy because they told us to. Prophets have and continue to tell us to hasten the work of salvation and double convert baptisms. And, as paraphrasing Elder Ballard here says, this is a great quote, and I'll give it to you if you want. Less than 2% of wards and branches in North America baptize more than 2 people a month. 98% can do better. Such a great quote. But this is not what I'm referring to. I'm, in fact, referring to when the Valley Forge stake asked the apostles, what do we need to do to get a temple in Philadelphia? The answer was staggeringly straightforward. This was actually some apostles. I don't know if I name drop them here, but if I don't, then I'd probably decide not to, so I won't do it here either. But this was actually from some apostles, um, who are no longer with us. Baptize 1,000 people. Fast forward a couple years, and they announce a temple in Philadelphia. So yes, the apostles are not liars. Fast forward a couple more years, and now it is not only a temple, but a $60+ million visitor center plus living quarters. It's amazing what they did there in Philadelphia. So yes, if you do more than they ask, the blessings are more than you receive. Fast forward some more years, really quickly, to prove another point of how the gospel is the same yet everywhere, and that the commands from the Lord and his apostles are the same across the planet. I am living in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, where I was, and a temple was announced here. A couple years later, they can't even get land set apart and dedicated. So it's been years since this was happening. I think they finally built the temple there. This is Oh, you did? Okay, this is 2025. Okay, so this I wrote this years ago, okay? And so there it was like something like 7 or 8 years it took before anything even happened. But anyway, so the stake president asks the apostles, right? What do we need to do to get the temple built here? Like, what can we do to build this process up? And the answer blew me away because I I hadn't told anybody this except for some missionaries that were serving my mission. They said baptize 1,000 people. So the story doesn't end the same, however, in this case. But it was crazy because in both cases I heard an apostle say, baptize 1,000 people to get a temple. So I thought that was crazy. Me personally. So I'm hearing this. Okay. But the story in Winnipeg doesn't end the same way. You see, the mission decided to not do what the apostle asked. Instead, they decided to focus on, well, let's try to reactivate 1,000 members, or rather, trying to sacrifice fruit and grain instead of the firstlings of the flock. I make a Cain and Abel comparison there, and failed at even producing 100 reactivations. And I know that from personal. I know that. And I should say here, I didn't say it here, but like they tried to baptize people first. And then when they realized that they were never going to do that, then they switched it to reactivation. But anyway, in the process, they saw their missions baptisms half to under 100 new converts a year, while at the same time, their total missionaries increased by over 250%. This mission not only saw baptisms half, they had the total number of missionaries multiply, meaning if they had just kept doing what they had been doing before, they should have seen convert baptisms rise at the same rate as the increased missionaries. In the current year of 2014, the temple here, years and years later from the initial announcement, has still not even been dedicated or started. So if you think that the apostles aren't liars, think again. And how is the spirit in this mission? Well, 7 missionaries, and I probably should correct this as well. I don't like writing the numbers anymore if I can. 7 missionaries got sent home just last transfer alone. And the apostles have informed the mission that they are going to cut the number of missionaries in this mission over time as they are not being used effectively. That was a crazy thing to hear. So doing what you were asked is important, bottom line. That's it. And then Ashley added the side note here, the Winnipeg Temple was finally built and was dedicated October 2021. We had just moved to the US a month prior. That is crazy. 2021. So that was like, I had wrote this in 2014 and it was already been a couple years. So like, what, like, was it like 10 years later? Man, it might have been like 10 years later. It took them 10 years. Anyway, backtrack to my mission. Next question was how. And the answer was even simpler. We decided to work and tract. Two things that I get into this paper as worthiness and desire. Okay, so it was. So yeah, it was so the temple was announced 2011. So it was 10 years after the announcement. That's crazy. Now they didn't like the answer. So so this is interesting. So when the apostle, well, it was 70s and then an apostle, actually two apostles. But when they came out to my mission, they would ask like, well, like how did you do all this? And the answer from our mission president was always we decided to work hard and tracked. And they actually really didn't like this answer. This is not what they wanted to hear. So they decided to send eventually 70s and apostles out with our assistance to the president at the time, as well as some zone leaders to try to figure out the how. Like how is this mission doing what they're doing? What they concluded was, and this is hearing from them, we've been all, and this was once again I don't want to name drop here because that was always weird, but I know the apostle in this case, and they said we've been all over the planet with missionaries everywhere, and we can honestly say your mission has the best teachers on the planet. And they had concluded that was the reason why we were having the success we were having. Now that's a massive compliment and a celestial vote of approval for the mission as far as teaching. Considering that I was one of the best teachers in my mission, possibly the greatest teacher in my mission, and I know this because my name would have been thrown around in the ring by many in my mission as the greatest teacher that went through there. Now this is not shared to boast. I'm not saying that to boast, simply to provide credibility to the writer, to me. I haven't simply talked the talk, I've walked the walk, and I'm hoping the experiences I share in this will be helpful for those seeking to walk the same walk. The why or how we became such great teachers will be showcased in this guide. The question, how many people did you baptize? Honestly, I find it somewhat funny that people almost always immediately assume that all I cared about was the numbers, and almost always ask, how many people did you baptize? It was entirely because I was able to look past the number that I was, in fact, able to reach out and pull up as many people as I did. The numbers, for the purposes of this guide, let me just say, I baptized weekly. More importantly, still, than my mission more important still than my mission was what happened before and after my mission. Did I just wake up one day and become a great teacher or missionary? I sure hope you don't think you will be able to achieve greatness at such a cheap cost. I was an example in high school, teaching those in my football team not only by example but by word of invitation. I gave a drug dealing Mexican on my football team a copy of the Book of Mormon. Uh, my man. And prayed with him openly at school. His name was Mario Lopez, a dear friend of mine at the time. I remember that. I gave scriptures to my now beloved wife, Ash. I don't know, so beloved. Stop. Ashley English, then Ashley McGregor, and taught her about the church. I didn't support hazing on the football team and, in fact, carried the pads of the freshmen on my team. Some might assume that I did this because I wasn't good at anything else, or possibly that I didn't have friends. I was the best running back. I was among the best running backs in the entire state of Idaho. Was in the all-state band for playing baritone, as well as the all-state choir. I was also in the honor roll maintaining GPA well over a 3.75 in both high schools that I attended, and my time in university was spent tutoring calculus and chemistry. Being great at missionary work doesn't mean you neglect everything else. It is what allows you to excel at everything. And everyone can be a superstar in the gospel, regardless of any personal inabilities you might have or suffer with. When I got home from my mission, I baptized my girlfriend, Ashley, waited a year, and got sealed in the temple to her. We did not get married civilly first and wait. We followed the Savior and the straight and narrow. Side note, the procedure for new converts and temple sealings has since changed. Ashley put that in there too. Yeah, it has since changed. You don't actually have to do that. That's it. You no longer have to go pout that way. Since then, I have worked with missionaries who desire to increase their potential for good and have seen amazing results everywhere we have gone. Every unit we have been in has seen their, except for this one, has seen their total baptisms for the year at least double. Some have increased by as many as 4 times just by working with me. Man, things have changed since COVID and social media and the way missionaries do and do not do work. This has led me to many opportunities to teach, to expound, and give advice as the missionaries tried to internalize, preach my gospel, and one of the main reasons why I am writing this guide. This guide will provide the means for those who seek to improve to do just that. And with that said, this is not a guide, and I said this in the 2026 introduction, as much as it might upset people, this is not a guide for missionaries who want to go off and create TikTok videos or seed the fruits, as it were, of priestcraft, so that they think that when they get off their mission, they can just start practicing priestcraft, and go right from, oh, I'm a rapping missionary, right into I'm a rapping member, and sell CDs and make a ton of money. This isn't a guide for that. This is for those selflessly who want to find, teach, and baptize, become better missionaries before their mission and after the mission, as members of the church. That's what this is for. Okay, so I have a table of contents here that Ashley's been working on and has this attached to, and it's a running thing, so it's going to update as we go, and so it'll be able to connect us to all this stuff. So man, it's gonna be big. Okay, so the page numbers are wrong. We'll get the page numbers figured out. Ashley says, do not worry about that. Okay. Okay, so catch the fire. This is the first section I want to put in here. Nothing, in my opinion, spreads the fire more than personal testimony and miracles. You want to get excited about missionary work? You won't unless the person selling it to you has the fire. I know the church is true and I know miracles happen, and I want you to experience it for yourself. That is entirely the purpose of this work, not to boast, but to create and share the same experiences for you. I know you can obtain and learn and grow exactly as I have, if not more so, and quicker. Here are 20 stories from my mission about such growth, miracles, and fire. I testify they are true. Michael's mission story number one. I was at the bottom of West Philadelphia. My companion and I would take turns praying and asking the Lord where we should go tracting. Eventually, I couldn't get my companion to pray about where we should go tract. He felt like the Lord was not answering his prayers and that the Lord was not leading him and thus us to where we needed to go. So eventually, I was the only one praying where we should go to tract. One such day, I prayed about where we should go, and I felt very strongly that we should go to this specific street. I always prayed looking at a map. That was just the way I went. I prayed and then I looked at the map until I felt prompted about an area, right? Or hopefully I got prompted about an area. When we got to an area that we had been tracting, me on one side of the street and my companion on the other. Philadelphia had tight streets, row homes, so we were always within 15 feet of each other. So calm down. If you're like, what do you mean you were tracking on different sides of the street? We were row homes. It was very, very tight. About halfway down the street, I knocked on the door and a man answered the door. Once he saw me, a smile crossed his face. And he began to chuckle and then said, "Come on in." And wait, man, why am I getting emotional at this? And waved at me with his left arm and then turned around and disappeared into the house. I turned around and called my companion over, who was on the other side of the street, and I went into the house. I noticed when I walked into that man's house that he had posters of Sam Cooke and the Temptations, etc., all over the walls of his home. Now, these were all groups or singers that my dad actually loved, so I recognized all of them, and which obviously I was subjected to listen to growing up, so I was very familiar with them. I pointed at the posters and then began singing the songs from the different groups, and his response was, "No black kids your age know any of these groups, and yet you do," implying obviously I'm some white kid and I knew all these bands. And I told him about my dad and how much he loved the music, and he responded, "What are the odds?" About that time, my companion came in. I stood in the doorway with the door open so I could still see my companion. So once we came in and sat down with him, his first question was, "How did you find me?" To which we replied, we didn't know what he was saying. Like, should we know him? Like, it's like maybe he was an ex-member or less active member. Like, that comes up a lot. So that's what initially we were thinking, that this was just some ex-member or something like that. Or maybe he had talked to a missionary the day before and had given the wrong address, right? So that happens too, right? You lie to the missionary, say, "Oh yeah, I live over on 22nd Street on this address," but you don't actually do that, and then the missionary's knocking and you rap, and you're like, "How did you find me?" The man then told us his story, that he was a member of a local church for the past 40 years and actually was a deacon in that church, which means a lot more in the Baptist churches than it does in our church. The church, well, not as much. I mean, like, obviously, have the priesthood and they don't. But I mean, like it takes a lot longer to become a deacon, and in these Baptist churches. So meaning this was a serious thing. The church had recently undergone a schism in which his Baptist church had accepted homosexuality and homosexual marriage, and they started teaching it, and had decided that they would no longer teach it as an affront to God. This was serious enough that it caused this man to actually leave his church, to step down. The previous night, the literal previous night, he found himself on his knees praying and asking God what he should do. He knew the commandments of God and wanted to live them, but didn't know where to find the truth or what to do. As he was praying intently, in his mind appeared two missionaries in white shirts with name tags. He remembered seeing them in his neighborhood when he was a teenager, and he was like in his 50s or 60s at the time. He then asked God, why? Why are you showing me these two? And God told him that this was the answer to his prayer. This man then promised God and said, well, if you lead them to me again, I will join the church. I will join that church. We knocked on his door the next day. I testified to this man that the Savior had an immense love for him and knew him personally. For at the same moment you were praying, I was looking at a map, praying to know where we should go. And the Lord told me I needed to go right here, right where your home is. And that man was baptized 3 weeks later. Oh man, this is going to be hard. Ah, he also had an awesome purple suit, like bright purple. And he showed up he showed up the first week wearing this just bright purple suit. Okay, things we can learn from this. God is a God of miracles. The Lord can do his own work. And if you're worthy, the Lord can and will use you as an instrument in his hands. If you're unworthy or lack real intent, lack faith in the Savior, etc., even if you hold the keys of God, God will use another who hold the same keys. You might be a bystander, you might get to witness miracles, but you will never become a fulfillment. I learned God answers prayers, and as always, I learned that the field is not ready to be planted, not ready to be dunged, not ready to be pruned. I know that the field is white, ready to harvest, and he that thrusteth in his sickle with all his might, the same layeth up in store that he perisheth not, but bringeth salvation to his soul. Micah's mission story number 2. We were driving home from a meeting late at night. There were 4 elders in the car, and we were passing a car stalled on the road. 3 of us hopped out of the car while the fourth parked the car, and we proceeded to push the stalled car down the off ramp and onto a really dark street. But we could see in the distance, maybe a mile or so down the road, there was a gas station. We asked the man driving the car, who, as an African, spoke very little English, it was broken English, if he has a gas container, to which he replied, no. So we were thinking, okay, we could maybe run down there and get gas and come back, right? But he didn't even have a gas canister. So we all decided to just push him down the road to the gas station. After about 10 minutes of pushing, this was crazy, we were covered in sweat. One elder was pushing on the back, 2 on the right side of the car, which was on the curb side of the road, and me on the left, which was the road side of the vehicle. All of a sudden, a man pulled over in a truck and hopped out of the car and gave me a gas canister and said, here you go. I thanked the man. I turned around and gave the gas tank to the elder at the back of the car, who then joined the other 2 elders on the other side to put the gas in the car on that side. As he was going over there with my back turned to the individual, I thanked the man and I said, we'll get that gas canister right back to you. To which he replied, there's no need, elders. To which I turned around and he was gone. The other elders came back from the other side of the car and asked who I was talking to, and I said, there was a man in a truck. And we looked down the road in either direction for miles and there was no lights. The 2 elders on the other side of the car never even heard him or saw him. The elder at the back of the car said he heard him, but never saw him. I heard him, I saw him, but I can't even remember his face. If 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 we weren't standing there holding the gas canister, nobody would have believed or known what had happened. We told the individual who was driving that we had a gas canister for him and we put it in his trunk. And I still to this day said, man, I wish I had kept that gas canister. I would have like put it up somewhere and been like, that's the gas canister. I should have kept it, but I didn't. And the man drove off, and we walked back to our car and drove home the entire time trying to figure out what had just happened. And the thing that we can learn from this story is that angels are among us, and they're willing and ready to help us. Micah's mission story number 3. I was at the bottom of West Philadelphia. We didn't have a baptism lined up for that Sunday, so my companion and I prayed for someone who had been to church enough times so that they could get baptized that Sunday. As we were saying the prayer, a man's face and name came vividly into my mind. The prayer ended, and my companion said, I know who it is. I know who's ready to be baptized. And I said, who did the Lord tell you? Expecting him to say the name of the man who was in my mind. But instead, he had a woman we were teaching in his mind. I told him who I had in my mind. This man that had popped into my mind was somebody who had been to church for months now, and the last time we were over there, my companion had attempted to commit him to baptism, to which the man refused. So my companion had what we called soft dropped him. He was unwilling to go over to his house ever again. He had taken this man's rejection to be baptized personally and didn't want to go back. When I shared this man's name, my companion became hostile. He was not happy, going as far to say the Lord would not tell me or tell us to go back to that man's house. I felt the spirit wash over me, and it told me, stay calm. Everything would work out and that we should follow my companion's plan. We went over to the lady's house. The appointment was a no-show. She wasn't even there. And when we got in contact with her on the phone, standing outside her house, she dropped us. I could see my companion's face as the conversation was happening on the phone, becoming more and more upset, and his rhetoric becoming more hellfire and brimstone. The conversation abruptly ended. My companion didn't even make eye contact with me and just looked up the street and said, well, she's going to hell. A few moments later, I asked him, can we go to a stop by on this man? My companion reluctantly agreed. When we knocked on the door and the man answered, the man's face lit up and he said, oh, elders, just who I wanted to talk to. We went in, we sat down, and the individual said, elders, before you even start, I need to tell you something. I've been praying, and the Lord told me vividly a few days ago that I need to be baptized this Sunday. We hadn't even said a single word yet, not even an opening prayer. The man was baptized that Sunday. The very next Wednesday, we had a zone conference, and during the fast and testimony meeting, my companion actually stood up and started to bear his testimony, and then he even began to cry. He said that he learned a powerful lesson the previous week. And the lesson that he learned, he said, the power of unity in your companionship. He said that he hated me as a companion because of all my faults, but that once he learned to love me as the Savior loved me and decided to be unified in the companionship, miracles happened. Things we can learn from this. Free flowing tears in a testimony does not necessarily mean truth or the Spirit. Do not try to rationalize revelation, for the Lord's thoughts are not your thoughts. Even if you don't have a baptism lined up for that Sunday, or in other words, even if all of your other best plans have fallen through, the Lord does not give you a commandment that he has not provided a way for you to accomplish. The Savior's new plan of preach my gospel includes the commandment to baptize weekly, and it is a fulfillable commandment. If you don't have the spirit of truth in your life, if you don't have the spirit of truth in your life, miracles can pass you by and you won't be able to recognize them. Just like with Laman and Lemuel, their hatred for Nephi blinded their minds to the miracles that they had just seen performed by Nephi. Micah's mission story, number 4. While I was doing my 3-week stint as a moving specialist, you laughing? Oh. The position was an office elder position that most missionaries never held for long. We had just moved an elder in the northwestern section of our mission to Pennsylvania. You know what's funny is I was actually talking to um, Topher about this just like a couple weeks ago, and he never heard of it. I was like, man, that'd have been so awesome to have that in my mission. So like in my mission, there was people called moving specialists, and they were a type of office elder, and most people only ever went in for like 3 weeks or 6 week stints. So it was just like a short thing. They got ET'd out or whatever. So like everyone typically had to do it for a little bit. Um, and what you did is all you did was drive around and move furniture around and people's stuff. So like you get your call. I'm on Sunday. Micah, you're gonna be transferred from this area to this area. I'd pack all my stuff up and I'd have it in a part in my room, and I'd go about on Monday moving around and like and going to my next area. And the moving specialist would show up to my apartment, get all my stuff, put it in the truck, and drive it to the next area and then unload it in the next area. So the missionaries would have to do is like they'd have to just leave and like drive or take SEPTA, which is a public transportation, to the next area. And so you never actually had to move anything. So if you needed new furniture, like you have a broken couch or a new thing, the moving specialist would show up and like take stuff out, put it in rentals and so forth. So that's basically what you're doing. You're basically like just moving elders around and doing service like that for everyone. Okay, so I was doing that. I was doing my 3 week stint, right? 3 week stint in the break. The what is what are they what's a nickname for jail in the the slammer. There you go. I was doing my 3 week stint in the slammer. That's right. Okay, and so we just moved elders from the northwestern section of our mission in Pennsylvania. We were driving back home. While we were driving home, the Spirit prompted us to go eat some Chinese at a sit-down restaurant. I said to my companion, I think we need to eat some Chinese. It was really weird. And he was driving and looked at me and his eyes got wide and he said, the same thought just crossed my mind. And we didn't see a Chinese place. It was just like, you need to eat Chinese food. And it was like, okay. So I said, let's keep an eye out for one. And it wasn't even a minute later, we saw a Chinese restaurant on the right side of the road. Our thought was that maybe there was somebody in the restaurant that we needed to talk to. Like we were thinking, oh, this is probably going to be like this turned out to be this awesome baptism story, right? But when we got in, it was literally dead. Like there was not a single person in the entire restaurant. And so we ate and left, and we thought, wow, that was weird. But didn't think about it again. So and then it was like, oh, that's weird. And then we just scrapped it. Less than a week later, the assistants to the president accused my companion and myself of looking at pornography on the office computers. While we were being lambasted by the assistants in front of the mission president, the thought came across me. How do they know someone looked at porn? So I asked, to which they let us know that they had a history with timestamps on the computer. So we asked to see them. When we saw the dates and the timestamps, our eyes got wide, and my companion said, give me a second. He left the room and came back in with his driving logs and receipts and pointed at the timestamp on the Chinese restaurant's receipt. And he said, this is where we were. It was the Chinese restaurant. My mission president looked at the date, looked at the assistants, and said, well, I guess that settles it. My companion then hacked into the same history and found that these assistants were in the office during times they weren't supposed to be there and were, in fact, on websites they weren't supposed to be on and bought stuff online on Sundays, which they weren't supposed to do. We circled all that information. We printed it off. We circled all that information and we handed it in. So, things we can learn from this: record keeping, record keeping, record keeping. The prophet Joseph Smith said, let me prophesy, the time will come when, if you neglect to keep accurate records, you will fall by the hands of unrighteous men. Were you to be brought before the authorities and be accused of any crime or misdemeanor and be as innocent as the angels of God, unless you can prove yourselves to have been somewhere else, your enemies will prevail against you. End quote from the prophet Joseph Smith. This was a literal fulfillment of that. Hypocrites of God are quick to go about gossiping, backbiting, murmuring, besmirching, but more times than not, it is projection. There is a much larger beam sticking out of their own eye, and instead of fixing it, instead of getting better, they instead spend their time tearing other people down. Micah's mission story number 5. In this story, I would like to talk about an event that happened on my mission in my very first area in North Philadelphia. My companion told me to pray to know where we needed to go tracting, and I was always really uncomfortable with this early on in my mission. So I prayed and prayed and prayed, and what I started to do was I got a map of our area. I put an outline around it with a marker to show our area borders, and then I would pray over the map. So that night, I wasn't getting anything, and it was time for me to go to bed. So I said, God, please help me to know where to go. So I went to bed, and I have a dream. And in the dream, I see a building in front of me, and on the building is painted a word within a box. There was a rectangle with a word written on it, and somebody is talking to me, and I don't know who it is, but they tell me, this is where you need to go tracking. And I wake and I walk up closer to it and I read it, and it says silver, but it's not a street sign. It's painted onto a brick building. So I wake up and I think it's interesting and I write it down. The next day during personal study, I'm looking over my map of my area again, and I'm looking for Silver Street. And I can't find it in my area. So I think, oh, maybe that was a dud. I don't know what that dream was about. But then all of a sudden, I actually find it. It's a tiny little street in the dead bottom left of our area. So it's in the southwest area of our area. And I tell my companion that's where we're going to go tracking. But here's the problem. Our apartment is on the far eastern side of our area on the street there, 20th and Lehigh. So my trainer, what he thinks I'm doing is that I don't thinks that I want to go to Silver Street because it will take us a long time to get there. So to walk there, right? And thus would chew up a lot of our tracking time. So he thinks that what I'm doing is I just pick the area on the farthest part of our area so that we chew up like a half an hour, 45 minutes walking or whatever. And so that way we don't have to track as long. That's what he thinks is happening here, right? I could not get him to agree to go there. So I reluctantly told him about my dream. I told him I prayed about knowing where to go. I didn't get anything, but then I had this dream where somebody tells me to go track there. And I even told him, I said about there was a street name and it was painted on the building, right? So he goes, okay, fine. We will go down and check this out. So we're walking. I think we even took a bus, maybe. We finally turn onto the street and we're trying to find out if we're actually on Silver Street, but there's a problem. There's no street sign anywhere. And so we look up, and you guessed it, painted on the side of a brick building was the word Silver Street. Now he was training me. He knew I had never been there. He himself had never been there because we both had been doubled into this area and opened it. So no missionaries had ever been there. And he looked up at the building and then back at me and then back to the building, then back at me. And he said, is that what you saw? And I said, yes, that is exactly what I saw. And he looked around again and said, we're going to find a baptism on this street. And I thought it was a little amusing. He was a little late to that party, right? I knew we were going to find something here because that's where God wanted us to be. And you always hear the joke, right? You always hear this joke. It was the last house on the left. But in this case, it was literally the last house on the left. In Philadelphia, you would track, and the row homes were attached to each other. And he would track one side, I would track the other. So I was tracking the left side, and he was tracking the right side. And I got to knock on the last house on the left. And there was nothing on the street, right? Nothing. And I'm like, oh my goodness, last house. God, last house. You sent us here. Like, this can't have turned out to be a dud, right? So, knocking on the last house on the left, lady answers the door and she says, oh, elders, oh my goodness, what are the odds? And she goes on to explain, I'm a member of the church and I'm from Baltimore, but I'm here visiting my cousin who's not a member. So we go in and we teach her, the cousin, and she was baptized. She had 6 kids. And at that point in time, the North Philadelphia building next to the Burger King was actually being constructed. So we had to bus all the way to Northeast Philadelphia, which is about a 40-minute to an hour and a half one-way trip up to that building. So it was crazy. So we actually helped them get there. We paid for their bus fare. And when we got up there, we had these 6 kids with us. I had one of the kids on my shoulders, yeah, because he was getting too tired. And he was from Africa, first counselor in the ward, came out of the building and then started to get emotional when he saw us coming up. We were walking up, and I had this kid on my shoulders who was just tired, and we were just wrangling all these kids up there, and he just started crying. And he said, "I just saw fulfillment to prophecy." I wasn't really sure what he was referring to or what he was talking about, if he was just talking about missionary work, but it was fast and testimony meeting. And this man stands up and bears his testimony, and he talks about this event, seeing me walking to the church with this kid on my shoulders, and he quotes the scripture about how missionaries will go out, how beautiful on the mountain are the feet of those who proclaim the gospel, and that they would gather up the children and put them on their shoulders and carry them to Zion. I was 19 at the time. I never read that scripture in that context before, because, everyone knows the context I read it in. I thought that was pretty cool. For the rest of my mission, I never put children on my shoulders because I didn't want to inflate my own ego. I didn't, never did it again. But I thought about that moment a lot, and that it was a pretty cool moment. Obviously, baptisms followed. That whole crew got baptized. Things we can learn from this: God is a God of miracles. The missionaries of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania were a part of fulfilling prophecy. The field is white, ready to harvest. If you ask or pray, you and knock, it shall be given you. I also learned early on in my mission that the Lord has people he wants us to find, and that he will bring us to them if we're worthy. This was important because I never received such a powerful answer to prayer again on my mission. I had to learn how to listen to the still small voice and grow. I also learned that you have to work after revelation. You have to go to the map and do some work yourself and then follow. It's crazy because think, if I had that dream and I didn't write that down, and if I didn't go look at the map, and then I didn't find it on the map, and then didn't talk to my companion, and then convince him, and then share with him the story, like none of that would have happened. It's Micah's mission story number 6. One time in North Philadelphia, my companion and I exited a lesson and looked at our watch. It was around 8:15 p.m. Our mission president taught us that we were to work until 9 p.m. and then go home. We looked at each other and then our watch and then at each other, and my companion, who was my trainer, said, "Well, we need to track until 9." The first door that we knocked on was a Jehovah Witness. A Jehovah Witness came to the door. Long story short, she wouldn't let us into her home. She wanted to just bash with us, and she also wouldn't let us just leave, right? The reason being, I would probably say the reason being, not i.e., the reason being she didn't want us tracting her street, so she didn't want us to keep going, so she wanted to keep us busy. So we actually spent 30 minutes standing outside trying to calm her down and to get her just to go back into her home. I don't remember who it was. One of us offered to say a prayer for her and then started to say a prayer. Jehovah Witnesses, which is a great idea because Jehovah Witnesses believe it's blasphemous to allow an improper prayer to take place in front of them. To them, you have to pray to Jehovah, not the Father. And as we know, Jehovah is a name given to Jesus Christ, not the Father, right? We know they're separate, but Jehovah is the name of the Son. And so as soon as that happened, she actually squealed. It was crazy. She squealed like a witch and then just ran right back into her house and slammed the door. It was such a great idea. Um, so then we looked at each other, looked at the time again, and then looked at each other. Now we had less than 15 minutes left. Now I at this time just wanted to go home. I just wanted to go home. I was completely done. But my trainer looked at me and he said, "Nope, we got to finish this street." We did what is called double knocking. Have explained this a couple times already, which means we each knocked a door to speed things up. The first door I knocked, the first door I knocked, a lady, not and, the first door I knocked, a lady opened the door a crack and proceeded to have a conversation with me. It lasted 15 minutes. She was so timid. She reminds me of a little bit like Jocelyn. She just kind of peeked through the door, like, is this guy gonna murder me? Yeah, like such a sweet lady, but just like really scared, right? Really timid. The lady was really nice, but was hesitant to let us in that late at night. So I asked her if we could come by at another time, to which she gave us a time the very next day, and the door was closed. My trainer wasn't too happy, however, as he had finished the street and was standing outside at a site, and he listened to that last bit of the conversation. because I had failed to pray with her, so it wasn't counted as a lesson. So he didn't like that, and I didn't get her phone number, so it was like, oh, well, you failed that. So my trainer had no faith that she was going to be there the next day. I did. I was young and naive, right? I was because I was a naive trainee. I was like, what she said? Why would she lie to me? So I took her at her word. Now the next day we showed up and she was there. And at least four people in that house ended up being baptized. That lady's grandson was actually named after me. So there was a Micah running around there. Something else interesting happened in the first lesson with her. For the first and only time in my entire mission, this has never happened before, never happened since, when explaining the power of the Holy Ghost to convince her of the truthfulness of what we were teaching, I said that the Holy Ghost has the power to activate any of your senses, right? As part of the light of Christ, it can activate any of your senses as to convince you in a way that you will know that it came from God and not from man or simply from yourself. I said, it could even be a smell. And my trainer looked over at me, his eyes got wide, and I shrugged. I was like, I don't know why I said that. At the time, I was like, that is the dumbest thing I think I've ever said. It could be a smell. Like, what did that mean? Later that night, my companion somewhat rebuked me for being so weird. He actually brought that up and was like, Elder, you gotta stop being so weird in a first lesson. When we went back over there for a second lesson, before the lesson even started, she had the lady, before the lesson even started, had to tell us of a powerful experience she had that happened to her last night while praying to know the truthfulness of what we were teaching and what she was reading. So we'd given her a pamphlet about the Joseph Smith story at the time and a book of, like, we'd given her some stuff, right? So she had actually read it all and then she prayed. And she said that while she was praying earnestly, she all of a sudden smelt this wonderful, sweet smell. And then all of a sudden, she recognized that that was the smell that her mother used to wear in perfume. Now, her mother had passed away some years ago. And she trusted her mother more than anything. And so the Holy Ghost had convinced her of the truthfulness in a way that was personal to her and that she couldn't deny. And so the smelling prophecy came true. Things we can learn from this: feed off the strengths of your companions. I think that's a great thing you can learn. And I think that makes a good companionship, makes a good marriage. My companion had faith that we would see blessings if we were exactly obedient to tracting that night, while I was discouraged. And my companion was discouraged about a stop back from his naive companion who didn't get, a prayer or a number, while I was hopeful and had faith. Follow inspiration and revelation to a T, even if it sounds or feels weird. And Micah's mission story number 7. My trainer in North Philadelphia prayed to know where we should go tracting. We went off tracting that area, and not only did we not have success, the people there were extremely hostile. That night, we had what's called an exchange. My district leader came into my area, and my trainer went into my district leader's area. My trainer told my district leader of my ability to receive revelation, praying over a map to know where we should go tracting, and the miracles we had seen because of it. My district leader wanted to see it in action. So I prayed just like every night, staring at the map, and, he joined me. And I pointed to a spot on the map and said, we have to go here. The next day, we left our apartment at 10 o'clock in the morning to go tracting. I should say AM here. I mean, modern missionaries are pretty lazy. To go tracting. That's a joke. Calm down. To go tracting, and we go to that area. So we go to the area on that I point on the map. Once we get there, I'm shocked to discover that it's literally the same location that my trainer and I had tracked the day before. I was obviously new to the mission and the area, so I had no idea that this was the same area that we had tracked the day before. And my trainer was gone, so I was with my district leader. So if it was my trainer, he might have been like, "Dude, we just were there yesterday, dork. Like we were, don't you know, like learn your area, greenie, right?" But it wasn't. It was the district leader who didn't know. So I pulled out my mini map out of my back pocket and I looked at the map and then up and then back at the map and then back up. And the district leader says, "Well, yeah, this is it. Like, come on, let's go." And I'm just thinking, I don't want to do this, right? To which I then protested. I said, "Look, let me explain what just happened here, district leader. We were here yesterday, and not only did we not have any success tracking these doors, the people here were very hostile, and that I must have made a mistake this time praying. And so you know what? I think we need to pray again. Let's pray over this map again, right?" My district leader, much to his credit, looked at me and said, "Elder English, the Lord told you to tract here, so we will tract here." I was not very happy, especially when I started knocking the same doors. This area was a giant cul-de-sac. Like it's, I say cul-de-sac, but like white people are gonna think of like cul-de-sacs and in subdivisions. It was a big circle, unique to the city. It was like a big cul-de-sac in North Philadelphia. It had a circular giant park in the center of it. So I mean, it was a much bigger than you would think of in a normal cul-de-sac. Now my trainer was African American. My district leader was Asian. So that was the only thing that I think maybe saved us. So we started knocking, going counterclockwise around this entire cul-de-sac, and people were answering and were very, very hostile with us. They were a little confused as well because they couldn't tell if I was the same white kid from the day before. And they definitely knew that the Asian guy wasn't the same. So they kept getting mad and saying, "You were just here yesterday. You guys don't know what you're doing, right?" We had a lady who came out on the porch and took out her phone and then started calling her neighbors right in front of us, telling them that the Mormons were here again, warning them of our approach. For hours, we didn't get let in a single door as we made our way around this entire circle. Finally, I could see the last house in the cul-de-sac, my escape from this torture. To my horror, what looked to me to be a battle hardened gangster came out of his house shirtless and sat on his porch. And I thought, oh no, he's waiting for us. So we finally get close enough to him and we start to tell him who we are. And he says, "I know who you are. You are men of God, aren't you? Come, sit down." And my first thought was, this guy wants to bash with us. But as we crossed over and sat down on his porch, I noticed that the man is holding on his lap a brand new infant, and his chest had a scar running right down his sternum. The man proceeds to tell us that he had a near death experience and had a new child at the same time period. And he was praying and told God that if he would or will prolong his life so that he can help this child, he, the man, will do whatever the Lord wanted him to do. He then tells us that the Lord told him to get up and go sit out on his porch because he was sending someone to him. He said when he sat down on the porch and saw us knocking the street, he assumed we were the messengers he was waiting for. The man also owned his own vehicle, which missionaries will know that in itself is another miracle. The man, his wife, and his two older children, who were 10 and 12, were all baptized. Things we can learn from this. If you don't follow inspiration and the directions from the Father, you won't experience the miracles. Another thing, it doesn't matter how wrong you think the inspiration is, follow through on it and then judge the fruits of it after. The more you do this, the better you will get at receiving and then recognizing real inspiration versus strange spirits. All right, Michael's mission story number 8. I was in North Philadelphia with my trainer and we were double knocking. I knocked on a door and a nice lady answered the door and she said she wasn't interested, but she was very friendly. So as my companion was knocking the rest of the street, I talked to her. I explained who we are, what we do. She said something along the lines of, "I bet your mothers miss you and worry about you." And I felt prompted for the first time in my mission, but this is something I did use. I did use this tactic repeatedly for the rest of my mission. Great tactic. Note this one. This one's a good one. To lament about missing my mom's cooking to women who I knew were mothers. She immediately became worried and said, "Oh no, what do you eat?" And I said, "Oh, pancakes, top ramen, To which wasn't, which is true, but I can also cook, but that's what I was, I do eat those things. To which she then said, "Oh no, that's terrible. I'll tell you what, you and your friend need to come over for dinner." I said, "Wow, seriously? That's so nice." And then she asks for my phone number, and I give it to her. And she says she will call us. She then says goodbye and closes the door. My trainer is so disappointed once again with my failure to get her number or to say a prayer with her. This is still in North Philadelphia. I'm still really naive, right? So much so, this is crazy. So much so, he complained about it the whole way home. He was just ripping me a new one the whole way. And this trainer of mine, great guy, great trainer. He was African American. He was 24, turning 25. He like with a master's in engineering. So like he was way more mature, way older than normal missionaries, right? So like he was just so tired of dealing with like just stupid young young missionaries, right? And so he's just ripping me the whole way home, right? And I'm like, oh man, I thought she was nice, right? So then we sit down. So we sit down in our area. Remember, he leans back, and then he's still going on about this, right? So then he's like, okay, we need to do some role plays, right? We need to start doing role plays with me about how to do it right. So he's actually like, you're not going to get a break from 3 to 5. We're going to role play this because that was so pathetic. And I told him, I was like, I thought she was genuine. I thought she was nice. And he said something along the lines of, there is no way somebody, a non member, is going to phone you, Elder English, to give you a dinner appointment at their house. And as he was doing this, sitting across from me in his chair, myself feeling like a downtrodden failure, his phone rings. I hear my companion is saying, "Yes, the lady we just met? Oh, yes, the dinner?" And it becomes apparent that this lady has phoned not even an hour after our meeting. He is now having a conversation with her about her favorite food, his favorite food, that she was now going to make for him. The phone call ended, and my trainer looked at me and said something like, "Well, I guess we got a dinner." He was shocked. So we go over there. She holds her appointment and she feeds us, which is crazy, right? Because that just my whole mission. It's like that didn't happen so often. Didn't happen so often. We felt prompted to just feel her out and not plan for a full-blown lesson. During the dinner, she said something, and I felt super prompted to bring up genealogy, which I never did this again on my entire mission, let alone during a first meeting. To which the lady said, "Hold on a second, you two." And then she left the room. My trainer turns to me and goes, "What was that?" He's worried that I just spooked her, just randomly bringing up genealogy like that, and how like our church loves genealogy, right? And how we're so into that and how important that is for us. And that I said something really weird again. The assumption being that she went into the back to get dessert or something to wrap up the meeting or to get us out. Like she's just like, now she's just gonna try and kick us out of the house, right? But instead, she comes out of her back room carrying a 4-inch thick binder full of paper. Like I can't stress enough how big this binder was. She tells us that she felt prompted to do genealogy and gather all these names together, and that the Lord had a purpose for all of this genealogy. And she was praying recently that to know what was the purpose. Why did you tell me to do all this genealogy? Needless to say, her and her 16-year-old son were shortly after baptized, and within a year, when the ward split, she actually became the first new Relief Society in that new ward. She obviously put that genealogy to good use. So, things we can learn from this: follow inspiration, even if it sounds weird. That one's going to come up a lot. Never underestimate a mother's concern for children and their stomachs. The field is white, all ready to harvest. I would just remind people once again that in this mission, on average, missionaries would baptize 1 to 2 people per year. I took part in just that first area of my mission to bring into the church over 1 person per week. I was there for 2 transfers or 3 months. My trainer, when I left as his companion, did not baptize a single person for the remaining 4.5 months of his mission. meaning the field is white, ready to harvest for those who are worthy, have a desire to harvest, and who are willing to do whatever the Lord tells them to do, regardless of how weird it seems. Those that care about what others think of them, i.e., the fear of men, will never be used the same way. Micah's mission story number 9. I'm loving these. When I was in Southwest Philadelphia, my second area, my district leader wanted to once again see how I prayed over a map to see where we should tract. So I prayed to know where we should go, and the next day we went there to tract. By the way, this praying over an area map thing had become such a wide, like, almost like fairy tale in our mission for me, that like district leaders or zone leaders would come into my area and they'd be like, well, let's see Elder English do it again. Let's see it do them again. And they would actually take part in the whole process. So they did, which is weird because they never tried to like replicate it in their own area. So they always wanted to see me do it, but like not one person ever thought, I if Elder English can do it, like I could do this. I could get a map and outline it and pray over it and find where the Lord wants me to go. But anyway, everyone, it was like a circus act. So they all wanted to like see me do this. So we tracked from 10 to 3 and had minimal success, and then we were walking home. So, needless to say, this district leader was not happy probably with this showing, right? Like, oh man, what was wrong with this? You didn't get anything, right? So, I was told by the spirit to stop, so I stopped. My district leader asked why we stopped, and I told him we needed to go back the direction we were coming from. So we walked back. I found myself looking down a street, and the spirit told me we needed to track that street, even though it was time to go home. So I told my district leader, I think we need to track this street before we go home, and he agreed. We started double knocking, him on the left side, me on the right side. You know what's else crazy about these stories? And I don't say this to boast. Every single one of these stories, when we double knocked, I was always the one to knock on the door. And I think that's really important to say too. Not to boast, but it's like it's to showcase and prove to the person that you received the right revelation and inspiration. Like you listened, and I'm going to put you in the place, right? You're like Joseph has said, you will receive these sudden strokes of ideas and you will see them fulfilled. Not like others. You won't see others will see them fulfilled. No, no, you will personally see them fulfilled shortly or sooner. And I think that's really important. About halfway down the street, I knocked on a door. The door opens. A lady comes to the door, and I started talking to her. She doesn't say much, and I start to feel weird. And then the lady took a couple steps backwards and collapsed on the couch. I wasn't talking to her for very long. It was just like 5, 10 seconds. Hi, how you doing? I'm Elder English, from the church. We're messengers from Jesus. Talking to her like that, and she's just not saying anything. And then she just steps back, collapses. I turn around and call my companion over, and then let myself into the house and tried to ask the lady if she was all right, but she had become completely unresponsive on the couch. My companion comes in the door and sees the lady, and I tell him what happened. And without saying anything to me, he goes over to the lady, checks her wrist, sees an armband, and then pulls some trigger mechanism. And within seconds, somebody is talking to us via a speaker in the room. My district leader tells the dispatcher that the lady has had a diabetic episode and needs help ASAP. Turns out my district leader was a diabetic and knew exactly what had happened and recognized the medical equipment in the room and knew how to operate it. Shortly, EMS showed up, came in, took her to the hospital. While they were working on her, the EMS asked us how we knew her, and we explained how we got there. And they said that if we hadn't found her when we did, she would have most certainly died. I was transferred out of the area shortly after that, but I left detailed information about her in the area book. I asked the elders that were in the area now about her, and they told me that they had gone back over to visit her and that she was furious with them because those elders that were here before stole $20 off my table while I was unconscious. We obviously didn't take her money. So, things we can learn from this. The Lord puts pieces together and makes them work in a way that defies chance. Like I knew nothing about diabetes, and neither did my companion. My district leader, however, did. Once again, always follow inspiration if you want to be the fulfillment of the Lord's work versus simply being a bystander to miracles. The Lord has a work to do for the saving of souls as well as the condemning of souls. There is no way to explain what happened to that lady other than an act of God, and yet the lady hardened her heart. Micah's mission story number 10. North Philadelphia, we were walking home, me with my trainer, and I felt prompted that we needed to go into this corner store. My trainer shrugs and says, maybe they sell cheesesteaks here, which obviously every human being of common intelligence and above loves. It's a good side note there. So we go in there, and I can't figure out why I'm there. So I just order a cheesesteak with my trainer. And as we are sitting there waiting for them to be made, because we go outside and we sit on the curb, a young girl comes across the street into the store because we were sitting on the curb and we went back to get our cheesesteaks. This is important because she saw us there and walks right up to me and says, "What's a white boy doing in my corner store?" And I said, "Excuse me?" And then she says she was watching us walk down the street from her second story window and felt like she wanted to come talk to us. So she saw us sitting on the corner and saw us go in the corner store and she was like, "What are they doing here?" But that she convinced herself not to because we were just passing through. So she saw us about there, like, oh, well, I should go talk to them. But then we passed through. Oh, wait, they're sitting on the corner, right? But when she saw us go into the corner store, she thought, if a white boy is brave enough to go into a corner store in this neighborhood, then I'm brave enough to go talk to that white boy. We sat down on the curb and ate our cheesesteaks and had a lesson with her. She came to church a couple times and I got transferred. I don't know what happened to her. My mission president was really strict with missionaries having no contact with people in previous areas. People always ask me about this. Do you have contact with people from your mission? What's actually really interesting is my mission president had a very strict policy of you no contact with people in previous areas and no writing and letters and so forth. So I actually don't have contact with many of these people. My mission president had a very strict policy on you write him only him a letter and one letter home. So I actually don't have any contact with most of these people. Anyway, he only allowed us to. Oh, I said this. He only allowed us to write letters to him and our parents once a week. All other correspondence was or were prohibited. So there you go. Things we can learn from this. Cheesesteaks are celestial. That's a good lesson. Follow the promptings once again, even if they seem weird. I think that's another one that the more important than anything, I like the stories in which the promptings were weird and like get a cheesesteak, go eat Chinese food, tell people the Holy Ghost can activate a smell if it has to. Things like that are the most important, I think, because people really have a hard time following inspiration, especially if they think it's weird. And you got to listen to it when it comes. Micah's mission story number 11. My companion and I tracked from 10 to 3, had minimal success, and we're in the process of walking home for our one break that we take from 3 to 5. I was feeling a bit miffed because I felt strong about going to that area, but hadn't found who I thought I was supposed to find. In the process of walking back to our apartment, I heard a West African woman on the other side of the street disciplining who I thought at the time was her child. The spirit told me that I needed to go talk to her. So I turned to my companion who I was greenie busting. He was only out for 6 weeks, and I said, "We need to go talk to that lady." He said, "No, we need to go home and take a rest." I thought, here's my chance. Here's my chance to be the one that's like, no, let's work through this, right? I proceeded to then jog across the street and started the conversation with this lady. She didn't seem to want to even talk to me. She didn't want to even talk to me and continued walking to her destination, which turned out to, in fact, be her home. As I followed her and talked with her, she let me know that she had a church and she had a Bible study and she was not interested, et cetera, et cetera. But the spirit told me that I needed to keep trying. My companion was following us like a lost puppy about 20 yards behind us. He didn't even want to join the conversation. A couple times he actually motioned me to go. Like, actually, come on, let's go. Stop talking to her. Finally, we get to this lady's home, and she is trying to get in her home and leave. And in one final desperation, I bring up West African food. And I ask her if she knows how to cook cassava leaf. She turned around and lit up. "Oh, you know cassava leaf?" I let her know, "Of course I know cassava leaf. I love West African food. Cassava leaf, potato greens, fufu, etc. But my favorite is jollof rice." She further lit up. "Oh, that's so nice." So I said, "The problem is, it's so hard to find people who will cook for you." So I asked her if I paid you, would you cook an African meal for us? She said something along the lines of, if you eat African food, I will cook African food for you for free. And so we actually got an appointment with a free meal scheduled. When praying to know what we should teach when we went there, I felt prompted that we needed to bring a recent West African convert over with us. So we called this recent convert and we asked her if she would go with us, and she agreed. When we get to the door and knock on it, the lady answers the door, sees the member we have brought with us, and goes, "Oh," and then says her name. I I apparently omitted it here for safety purposes, although I this lady was very grandma, an Oma, so she's probably no longer with us, and I still remember her name. I wonder if I should say it. Such a nice old lady. Turns out that they knew each other, but more than that, they were actually related. The member was married to this lady's brother, who was now deceased. When civil war broke out in Liberia, a lot of people were killed, and families would come and be placed in cities like Philadelphia, and they wouldn't even know if the relatives were alive or dead or still in Africa or now living in the same city. They had no idea. So that you could have like brothers and sisters living like 3 or 4 blocks away from each other, and they thought the other one was dead. It was such an awful situation. We also come to find out that this lady that I we had gotten this dinner appointment with is a member of the African tribal royalty over there. So she was a big deal. Because they knew each other, the lady wanted to, before even eating, wanted a lesson about the church. So now, right out of the bat, she's like, you know what? Before we even eat, what what's going on here? What's going? I'm trying. I'm so having a hard time not saying their names. What's going on here? Like, you're here with these guys? Like, I thought you were a member of this like church. Like, I thought you were dead or whatever. Like, what do you mean you're a member of the church? And so then we sat down, said a prayer, and we started a lesson. Another relevant thing to point out, both these ladies, the members were in her 80s and the lady was in her 60s. So these were grandmas. The toddler I had seen the lady with was, in fact, her great grandson, not her child. We asked the member to explain the story of Joseph Smith, the recent convert. And then we sat back and proceeded to watch one of the most powerful teaching experiences of my life. The member began speaking in her African dialect, and I couldn't understand much of what she was saying. But when this old Oma, got off the couch and got down on her knees and put her hands in the air and was pointing at the ceiling, I knew she was acting out the first vision. The lady looked a bit shocked and asked a question, which I'm 90% sure was God and Jesus. And the member nodded and pointed back up at the ceiling, now with tears in her eyes, and finishes explaining the first vision. She points at her sister in law and says, "And this is why you need to be baptized in this church." To which the lady looked at us and said, "Can I come to church on Sunday?" It was one of the most amazing member missionary moments I've ever seen. The lady and her husband and her granddaughter showed up to church that Sunday. After church, the lady walked right up to me after sacrament meeting and said, "Me and my granddaughter will be baptized in this church." Her husband, and her granddaughter were all eventually baptized. Things you can learn from this. Once again, don't think that following inspiration is easy or will result in a quick fix or in an easy victory. I exhausted everything I could think of before the wall came down. Once again, desire, worthiness, and obedience and faith determine whether or not you will be a fulfillment to prophecy or merely a bystander to it. Another thing to learn, just because somebody was hard or cold up front does not mean that they aren't absolutely the elect. Members and friends have the potential in them to open doors in people's hearts that strangers simply cannot. Don't be obsessed with making things always about you. Priestcraft. Always have as your desire what is best for those who you are teaching. The work of the Lord takes no breaks. This lady turned out to be African royalty and was instrumental in bringing scores of other Africans into the church. Apparently, I get that into that in the very next story in the missionary story number 12. And the missionary that was to have the privilege and honor in being a fulfillment of the miracle of bringing that lady in the church had to value souls more than his break. If that was the time to reach her, if that was the window, and the Spirit is telling you, then you need to act. The entire day tracting and walking home for our one and only break from 3 to 5, and the whispering of the Holy Spirit to go talk to this lady was a fourth watch principle, i.e., you receive no blessing until after the trial of your faith, and the trial of your faith will always be proportionate to the blessing. Micah's mission story number 12. My district leader, who was a maybe I'm just gonna get through the mission stories in this one. I'll stop at 10:30. I'll go through the mission stories and then I'll stop. I'll keep going through this later this week. My district leader, who was a French Canadian from Quebec, knew that I was having a lot of success, especially with West Africans, and I was greenie busting his trainee. And he had just tracked into a West African family who was polite with him but had no desire to have any lessons or come to the church. And he wanted me to go over and talk to her. So he arranged exchanges, and I came into his area with him. We go over to teach this West African lady at her house. She lets us in. I don't know how to describe it other than she ran a home like a foster care parent. Because once again, the Liberians and the way the war torn world worked, it's just like they were her children, but not they weren't all her children. If you catch my drift, right? She was just taking care of these Liberian widows and widowed kids, right? Or orphaned kids. Sorry. The war in Liberia, like I said, tore up families pretty good, and so there was a ton of kids living with her. We taught the lesson and got nowhere. Once again, at the very end of the lesson, I felt prompted to invite her to the lady and her granddaughter from story number 11, their baptism that was taking place that Sunday. When I said the name of the lady, so funny. When I said the name of the lady, this lady looked puzzled, and she repeated back the name to me. Were you talking about the same full name? This lady? I said, yeah, that's her name. She said, from the Kron tribe? And I said, yes, yeah, that's actually right. And she started chuckling and said, she's not being baptized in your church. Now, she obviously knew her because, as I said in the last story, this lady was a tribal royalty. And she didn't believe this lady was in Philadelphia, right? Let alone getting baptized at our church, right? So we convinced, right? So we convinced and committed her. Well, come to church on Sunday and see, right? And she agreed to go purely because she expected to prove us wrong. That either A, it was a different lady from the same tribe, not the lady, or B, it was the same lady, but she wasn't actually getting baptized. So she showed up on Sunday, and my district leader brought her and her family up to me as I walked in with my lady who was getting baptized and her granddaughter. The two Africans immediately recognized each other, hugged, and started talking. The other lady looked at me in shock and said, "This is," and said her name. "This is her." After church, I baptized this lady and her granddaughter, and after we got changed back into our church clothes, we joined the group, and my district leader's family got out of their chairs, marched over to us, this whole big group, looked me right in the eyes and said, if in her name, if she gets baptized, then I get baptized. And that's all she wrote for that whole family. They all investigated the church and eventually joined. Things you can learn from this: the power of an example, the power of one person having an effect on thousands, listening to the prompting of the Spirit, even if it seems weird, i.e., inviting someone who was totally not interested in church to a baptism. Once again, she was not interested in anything. And I'm like, hey, want to come to church for a baptism? And here's another one: not all French Canadians are bad guys. So that's a joke. Elder Poyer, that's a joke. But that was one of those cases where it's like just the example of a lady, just the example, paved the road for countless other people to be baptized there. Micah's mission story number 13. That was such a cool ward too, man. It like when Philadelphia, when that mission started, that ward had active about 75 to 80 people, and it was almost entirely white college students because it was in West Philadelphia next to the universities there. And within like a year and a half, they had split it and split it again. It turned into three wards. And it was just, they had every overflow open and all the sides were filled. And it looked like it was straight from Africa. Like everyone was in yellow and blue and green, African dresses. It was just like the whole thing was full. It was just it was so cool, so cool. And Africans are very physical, right? So like you'd come in there and they would just like grab you and hug you and kiss you and just oh hey, El English, oh mwah, mwah, just it was man, it was you never felt like you always felt like $1 million whenever you walked in there. It was just you just felt like genuine love, like everyone wanted to see everyone there. It was such a good experience. Anyway, missionary story number 13. In West Philadelphia, the missionaries were bringing in and baptizing so many people into the church that it was becoming impossible for members to give rides. There were simply too many people and not enough members with empty seats in their cars. The bishop there fasted and prayed about a solution and came up with the token system. And it, that's what he called it. So I'll put that in quotes. Brilliant bishop. To this day, he's a guy that to this day I talk about and I get emotional. Like that makes sense to me because he was just he was the best bishop I have ever had the chance to be around. Just an amazing guy. Now in Philadelphia, a token could be used for a single public transportation use. Everyone within the ward boundaries could get to the church with one token. So what this bishop did is he got a jar full of tokens, and after sacrament meeting, he would shake hands of all the members and he would meet them and talk to them, get to know them, and then if they required transportation, he would at that time give them two tokens. One would get them home that Sunday, and then the other token could be used to get them back to church the next Sunday. The bishop, who was a pediatrics doctor, planned on using fast offerings to pay for this, but then simply opted to basically pay for all of them himself because of the effects. Oh my goodness. He was one of the very first white, and I say this with love, but also a little bit of vindictiveness in my soul. He was one of the very first white members of the church with any sort of money that I actually experienced the spirit of Zion from. Like just like he was the reason why those wards exploded. Like we as missionaries did what we did, but without him being in place, we would never have been able to baptize, let alone retain so many people so easily. Um, I don't even know. I don't know how much money he spent on this until it became a something more permanent. Because of the effects of this bishop, he started with a talent around 90 active members of a ward, and within 1 year, it had split into three wards, all of which each had over 100 active members. His one talent became three talents because he sought first for the kingdom of God. When my family from story number 11 was baptized, problems arose because that lady's granddaughter was 12 turning 13. So the lady I baptized, her granddaughter was also baptized at the same time. Her granddaughter was the one who had the child that was walking on the street that I thought belonged to the grandma. And so she was 12 turning 13 and she had a baby. Okay. So, i.e., the great grandson that I met on the street that day was the son of her 12-year-old granddaughter. When going to church, the Oma took her great grandson with her to class, the Relief Society. And the granddaughter went to the Young Women's. The Young Women's president walked up to us at church and said that she would not be accepting this young woman into Young Women's because she had a kid, and that disqualified her from being able to attend that class. I was unaware of that rule at that point in my life, and I told the Young Women's president that we were sending this girl in, ready or not. And she then said she was going to go talk to the bishop, to which I agreed because I knew she has no keys. I did understand keys at this point in my life. I didn't understand. I didn't know about this rule, but I did understand keys. And I said, yeah, go talk to the bishop. That's fine. Later that week, we did get a call from our zone leaders, who was as soon as we answered the phone, as soon as we answered the phone, asked us, "What did you do?" So he was not. He was this zone leader was not a very good zone leader. But anyway, he was upset. What'd you do? I said, what are you talking about? I have no idea what's going on. He said, the bishop says he wants to talk to us tonight, and he didn't say what it was about. right? And this was the good bishop, right? So like this was the really good bishop, and so he was worried that like that, and so were we, that like we had done something to upset this bishop, and it was like we can't lose this bishop, right? We need him, on our side, and we need him supporting this. Like what did you do? Like you got the bishop mad at us, and the bishop said he wants to talk to us tonight. He didn't say why, but he said that you two needed to be there, like elder, me and my companion, right? So the zone leaders picked us up and drove us over to the church. And the entire way there, one of the zone leaders was chewing me out because he thought I had made the bishop upset. And he was telling me all of the wonderful things the bishop was doing, and we couldn't afford to lose him or not have him on our side, which I totally agree with. I'm like, oh my goodness, I screwed something up, man. What did I do, right? But I had no idea what I had done, so I didn't even know what it was about. So we sat down with the bishop, who had just come in from working as a doctor in his office. He said a prayer and he looked at me and said, "Are you Elder English, the one who baptized?" And he listed off the people I'd been baptizing. And he listed off some people, including this little girl and her grandmother. So he knew all the people I'd been baptizing. And then he knew that he was talking about this specific little girl. And then he immediately proceeded to gush over me, that he was so grateful for the work. Oh, this guy is so nice. That he was so grateful for the work that I was doing, how many people we were bringing into the church. He specifically mentioned the Oma because of the good she was doing in the community, and the zone leader who was chastening me. His eyes got wide in shock. He sat back in his chair. He was expecting a beatdown, not praise, and so was I. And and not only that, it's like if you just understood all the work that this bishop did, and he had just come from. He was so busy with work, and that he had taken the time to like do this right after work, and the very first thing he wanted to do was make me feel special. Like just such a nice guy. So this zone leader got moved into the highest baptizing area into the mission and only baptized a single person that transfer, right, which for us was terrible, let alone in the hottest area in the entire mission. And the only person he baptized was somebody I had found, ironically. I'll get to that in story number 14. But I was the only person he baptized was somebody I had found. Needless to say, he was not very happy with me being out 4.5 months and baptizing 11 people in a single transfer in an area that was completely dead. Not to mention the fact that he now thought that I was turning the bishop against him. So he was not very happy with me. So the conversation then changed to that of the little girl. So he brings us in, he praises me, did completely unnecessarily, and then changes the conversation to this specifically about this little girl. The bishop told me that he absolutely wanted to go with my plan. He wanted to have the Oma take the baby and have the girl stay in Young Women's. He then said, "I work as a pediatrics doctor in this city." And he looked right at me and said, "I know that there's a good chance that getting pregnant was not her choice." To which I responded, "It wasn't. It was what you think it was." And they were highly religious and didn't believe in abortion. To which the bishop said, "And that's exactly why we shouldn't punish her for doing the right thing." So we sat in that office for about an hour, and this bishop wrote up a plan of action for this one little, now 13-year-old girl. Oh, there was like 200 baptisms in this ward. It's insane. He spent an hour on her. How to make her feel comfortable, wanted. There was literally hundreds of people being baptized in this bishop's ward. And he was a doctor. He had a family with multiple young children at this time, and was extreme. His time was extremely highly sought after. Yet this bishop took an hour of his time after work to create a plan of action just for one single girl. But there's yet another story of this bishop, and that is at that time in the church, a study had come out, and the study showed that of people being baptized into the church, only about a third of them remained active 1 year later. Then they then showed how many of them stayed active in a year if They had received a calling, a friend, a responsibility, etc. And none of them had as big of an effect as they had hoped, except for one thing. And it was, have they been to the temple within 3 months of their baptism? If these recent converts had answered yes to that, that they had been to a temple within 3 months of their baptism, it more than doubled the retention numbers to well over 80%. This bishop, reading these numbers and knowing he would be responsible for the talents or souls he had received, started chartering a bus once again with his own money. And this bus would take recent converts once a month down to the Washington, D.C. temple, because at the time that was the closest one available. They then took a picture of the group in front of the temple and began lining the halls of the church with them. If you at conference around 2005 to 2010 saw pictures of a bunch of West Africans in a group standing outside the Washington, D.C. temple, there's a good chance that this was what you were seeing. Because it actually, anyway, they showed some of these pictures actually at conference sometimes. In front of the Washington D.C. temple. The activation rates of converts baptized in our mission was well over 60%, which was double the church's worldwide average. But this bishop maintained numbers between 80 to 100%. He was unbelievable. It was unbelievable what he managed to do in that ward. Things you can learn from this. This bishop gave me, a young missionary, a taste of what Zion could be and should be if members sought for the kingdom of God first. If members' desire was actually to build up the kingdom and to esteem his brother as himself. This bishop to this day was the best and most impressive example of somebody holding that mantle that I've ever seen. Numbers don't lie. Getting people to the temple really does have an impact. The parable of the talents is real. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth from those who neglected and or buried their talents, or decided instead to spend 2 hours or 5 hours or 6 hour your times just like raking over the coals, somebody because you don't think making positive pledges with somebody is a good idea. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth from those who neglected and or buried their talents, and there will be weeping and shedding of tears of joy for those who held the mantle, those who held the talents and multiplied them. You don't have to be an old missionary to be a great missionary. You don't have to be a zone leader to be a great missionary. Being an old and experienced missionary doesn't by default make you a better missionary than a younger or less experienced missionary. And vice versa, being a 40-year-old man or a 70-year-old woman doesn't make you any less effective as a missionary, right? That West African, Oman, that story above was instrumental in that missionary effort. It doesn't matter. The same can be said for a district leader, assistant to the president, etc. You lift where you stand, and the Lord will make you great. The missionary makes the area. The area does not make the missionary. If you are somebody holding talents or souls, i.e., holding keys, and you wish to multiply your talents, the first thing you will have to solve is the transportation issue. Members driving investigator is not and never will be a sustainable model for growth. If you wish to maintain your new talents, you will have to solve the problem of getting them to the temple within 3 months. Any bishop, stake president, etc., that doesn't have a transportation plan or a temple trip plan is not taking their talents serious. Micah's mission story number 14. And I wrote these a while ago. Okay? So don't come at me. All right, Micah's mission story number 14. I better hurry these, man. My second area of my mission, I was out 3 months and I got doubled into an area, meaning me and my companion were both new to the area. And my companion was somebody I had come out on the mission with. So we had a combined experience of 6 months, which is funny because the next transfer I greenie busted. So the combined experience was still 6 months. When we got to the area, there was a map on the wall that had an outline around what we thought was our area. I prayed to know where we should go tracting the very first day and felt really strongly that we needed to go to this specific area. The next day, we took off and went and tracked to that area. It was getting close to 3. That's when we headed back for our 1 hour break from 3 to 5, which we've already gone over. And we had pretty good success, right? But we knocked on this door, and a West African man answered, and we had a wonderful conversation with him. We had just moved to that area. He had just moved to that area, and so did he, right? He was interested in finding a church and was all around an extremely polite guy. In the middle of the lesson, he said, "Well, don't you two elders just live right next door?" And he pointed to the door not even 5 feet away from us. To which we said, "Well, no." And we told him where we did live, which was blocks away. And he said, "Man, I swear, I've seen you going in and out of there." And we both thought he must have been seeing members of another faith. Maybe he was seeing Jehovah's Witnesses or something like that, right? We wrapped up the lesson, said a prayer, and we are standing there looking at our clock, right? Decide we didn't have see looking at your clock. This is looking at your clock because it's on your wrist. We didn't have cell phones at the time. See how I did that? So we're looking at our clock, deciding if it was early enough to start walking back, and it was because at the time it was 2:45. We were debating, well, should we track right up to 3, right? I've had good experience with that. Like, but for some reason, you always have to talk yourself into it. And we look up the street and we see what looks to be missionaries walking towards us. And to our shock, it was our zone leaders coming home early. And yes, they lived in the very house the man had pointed to. They walked right up to us and wanted to know what we were doing. And we said, "We're tracting in our area." And they said, "This is our area." I pulled out a map from my back pocket with the outline of our area. And the zone leader said, oh yeah, I forgot. You just got doubled in. The area's changed. I think this might have been the dumbest zone leader on the planet. I'm crazy. So we got doubled in, and he had changed. The area had changed, and he didn't even bother to let us know. So he drew the new boundaries on our area on my map, and then we passed on all the people we had found that day, including the man that lived right next door to them. They wanted to know where we had tracted. Turns out we had tracted a full circle entirely around their house. So we just got a circle around their house. The African next door neighbor was actually baptized shortly after. This is the one I mentioned in story number 13. That was the only person that zone leader baptized the entire transfer, was that guy that we had knocked into that lived right next door to him. Things you can learn from this. Sometimes your baptism lives right next door. Talk to everyone. Be friendly with your neighbors. Get on a first name basis with them. Ask them if they need help, how their kids or dog is doing, etc. Missionaries have keys over every non-member in the mission, not just their area. That's something else I have to tell people about, apparently remind people. You don't get reset apart when you go to a new area. Mission story number 15, tracking Southwest Philadelphia. We tracked it into an old African Oma. She was in her 70s or 80s. A lot of them actually didn't know when they were born. That's a fun fact. So they didn't actually know the year they were born. They know roughly how old they are. It was a nice meeting. She did not have a church, and well, she was really excited at the prospect of going to a church where there was a lot of West Africans at the congregation, and she wanted to see it. We invited her to church on Sunday. We had a family of 7. I'll get into that story later. That we prioritized going over on Sunday morning, helping them get ready and get to church. And we didn't have time to check up on this Oma. We get to church, and this old Oma walks in, a little sweaty and looking very exhausted. She didn't have any money, so she walked the whole way there. She was so excited to see friends that she knew from Africa and was so excited to be there, but said to us, exhausted, "I don't think I can even walk home." And so we asked a senior sister couple if they would feel comfortable driving her home. They agreed, and the 3 of them hit it off and became good friends. They drove this Oma to church every week. This Oma was baptized 3 weeks later on the same Sunday as the family. The 2 senior sisters, missionaries, worked closely with me and the Oma after because they focused on genealogy but had a hard time understanding Africans. I'll get to that story another time. These 2 sisters worked with us a lot and got lost a lot. The story of these 2 sisters working with those I had in fact baptized and getting lost doing it was actually shared in the conference talk to grow up under the Lord at General Conference April 2006. If you go right now and check out that talk to grow up under the Lord at General Conference and watch the video of it, it'll actually show the sister missionaries. It'll actually show some people that were baptized and stuff, and you'll get to see the sister missionaries I'm talking about and some of the people I baptized. So yeah, to grow up under the Lord, General Conference, April 2006. Check it out. Hearing the story of the two sisters getting lost on their way to me and somebody I was teaching was probably the most exciting, fun thing I've had happen at General Conference. If you click and play the video, you will see a picture of these two missionaries teaching a recent conference. So fun stuff. Things we can learn from this. Do not complain so much. This African woman in her 70s and 80s walked like miles to church. Like she had walked, I think, like an hour, hour and a half just to get to church. I don't, it's crazy. It was a humbling experience, an experience where you asked yourself, if I had to walk like that to church, even knowing what I know, would I do so without complaint? You're never too old to change, to receive a second birth, your conversion of fire, etc. Micah's mission story number 16. After a long day, it was time to go home. We had worked until 9 p.m. like we were told. It was dark and we were wending our way back to our apartment. Streets in Philadelphia get a little more crazy as the night goes on, so we were moving back to our apartment pretty fast when I heard a man's voice talking with his friends in front of his car, and I knew that I had to go talk to him. I told my companion that we need to stop and talk to this guy. This is the same companion who was out only 6 weeks, who didn't appreciate me tailing that grandma all the way back to her home. He was scared. He wanted to go home. Pointed out that they were all standing around drinking alcohol. I said we needed to go talk to them, and then I crossed the street. When I got close, this West African's man face immediately changed from boisterous intoxication to sorrow. I said, "How are you doing this evening? We are messengers from Jesus Christ." To which the man told us that he knew that we were messengers of Christ, and he sent his friends away, and then poured the remainder of his alcohol out on the ground. He said, "You are messengers of Jesus Christ, and it's not right for me to be drinking like this." He said that he would invite us into his home, but that he wasn't in a good condition. And he said that he would get him and his family ready for us if we came back the next day. We said a prayer with him, thanked him for his time, and then came back the next day. This man was legally married. Sometimes individuals said they were married, but it was just common law. This guy was actually legally married, and he had 5 kids, all above baptismal age. We thought that family, taught that family. Oh, Ashley's here. Taught that family, and they became one of my best, most beloved West African families that I knew in my entire mission. They adopted me into their tribe. They said that I could call myself a Bassa man from that point on. There was a stake meeting the week after the Sunday that they were all baptized. We had 21 investigators at church that Sunday, my companion and I. So the bishop wanted us to confirm them that Sunday, the day they were baptized. Baptizing them and then confirming them was the most spiritually draining experience of my life. It was as though power had actually left me, and I didn't even know if I was going to be able to walk all the way home, but I did. I threw myself on the couch, thanked God for the day, and had a nap, something I still enjoy doing. The baptizing of that family was the record for the largest family baptized in my mission, with a husband and a wife, and the highest baptizing in a single week. And I would have missed out on that entire opportunity if I had feared man more than God. I, in fact, got to celebrate my 20th birthday over at their house. Things we can learn from this. Once again, always follow promptings. Miracles always occur in the fourth watch. Just because somebody is drinking or intoxicated or smoking or cursing, etc., does not mean that is who the individual is, or that they don't want to change, or that is the extent of their potential. Spiritual experiences are draining. I learned firsthand why Joseph was so exhausted, and later on why the apostles were so exhausted and Joseph was not. It is like a muscle, and spiritual experiences will exercise it and will drain you. But the more you do it, the stronger you will become, and your capacity will increase. Micah's missionary story number 17. I actually have a couple other stories from North Philadelphia, my first area, that I forgot to share. We found this lady early in the week and we're teaching her throughout the week. And we stopped by her house on Saturday to reconfirm her coming to church on Sunday, making sure there were no obstacles in her way that we could help her overcome, etc., etc. In the lesson, I felt prompted to tell her that Satan will give you something good, not of God, but good, to keep you from something great, something from God. Then the Spirit told me to say, you might even have a long lost uncle show up on Sunday. What are you going to do? She chuckled and said, I'd go to church. We left the lesson, and my trainer turned to me and once again said something along the lines of, what was that? You are so weird, Elder English. Like a long lost uncle. Like, what does that even mean? I think maybe like long lost uncle, maybe even the phraseology is like something that maybe white people say, like, but maybe black people just don't say. Like we say, like, oh, it's an old long lost uncle, right? Like like a weird saying that they weren't even familiar with. Anyway, Sunday came and went, and the lady didn't show up to church. We tried to get in touch with her throughout the week and finally saw her in person and asked her what happened on Sunday. Her face lit up and she said, oh, elders, you won't believe what happened on Sunday. A long lost uncle of mine that I hadn't seen in over a decade showed up. My trainer's jaw hit the ground. His eyes got wide and he just looked at me. I reminded her of what the Lord told her to be true the previous week, and I reminded her that the Lord warned her that a long lost uncle could keep her from that truth. Said that she remembered, but that she didn't believe such a thing could be from Satan. And not only that, her uncle was going to take her to his church, and it was a sign from God that that was what she needed to do. The lady never held another appointment with us. She had kneeled, she had prayed with us. She was told the message was true. She had accepted a baptismal date and was warned specifically of how Satan was going to attack her. And yet, she chose not to recognize the spirit of prophecy and signs of the times. Walking out of that apartment, my trainer was still in shock and he kept shaking his head and saying, this kid. I was, like I said, he was like 6 years older than me. I was never told to warn another person about a long lost uncle ever again. This was specific to her. She understood it and role played it with me, and she will be held to account for her decision. Things we can learn from this. Once again, follow inspiration, even if it seems weird. Just because somebody has received a spiritual witness of the truth, just because they've accepted a baptismal date, just because they've witnessed firsthand prophecy fulfilled, it does not guarantee outcomes. Layman and Lemuel, early apostates of the restored church, etc. I don't think actually read through this. Are perfect examples of this. Even if one rises from the dead, they still will not believe. Satan absolutely will give you something good, something of the world, to keep you from something great, something of God. He will take away your boils if you're willing to eat the bullet. Micah story number 18. Okay, I only got a couple more here, and then we'll probably end it for the day. And I'll do another one throughout the week as I finish this. The two quick stories dealing with a single family because they both deal with gifts of the Spirit. We got out of an appointment a little early, had a little time before our next appointment, and I thought instead of tracting, why don't we go over a sea? I'm pretty sure Ashley didn't read this. And see this recent convert family, do a stop by and see how they're doing. This West African family let us into their home, probably even fed us and gave us water. This was a big cultural thing. They always did this. And in the process, we ran into one of their family members who was there, who was not a member of the church. I struck up a conversation with her. She said she belonged to another church. I asked her if she would be willing to have a Bible study with us. She agreed, and 3 weeks later, she was baptized. I talked to this recent convert family and asked them, I thought you didn't know anybody who weren't members. And their response was that they knew people and they had no problem with us introducing ourselves and inviting ourselves over to teach them, but they didn't feel comfortable yet doing missionary work. It was at this time that I had an idea. That idea became to be known as retention specialists. My mission president wanted to know what I was doing and how I was finding so much success on my mission. Now, my mission president was very, once they have been baptized, they are now the ward's responsibility, and missionaries should not be over there. I convinced him that you could find thousands of baptisms off of these recent converts, and the reason is because they still have one foot in Babylon and one foot now in the church, meaning they still have a lot of friends and family who are not members of the church. Once people have been members for 10, 20, or 50 years, the amount of non members in their life dwindles into obscurity, or at least it should as the world standards continue to plummet. The problem is, or was, that recent converts were just like most people, terrified to do missionary work. My idea was to do random stop bys to recent converts, catching them off guard and catching them with non members who we could then teach. This was one of many examples I used, this story specifically, to prove my point. I was only out 6 months at this time to my mission president. It wasn't even a couple transfers later that the mission president rolled out the new program. He called them retention specialists, and they were elders in charge of wards with heavy convert baptisms, and their job was to do exactly this: visit only recent converts. This was a case of listening to the spirit of inspiration and revelation, but also the gift of the spirit of wisdom that enabled me to see this untapped potential. The retention specialists in my mission were a huge success, and I know they would never have been implemented if I did not listen to the inspiration and revelation and go to bat for it. Like I said, my mission president was at first very hostile to the idea. The second story dealing with this same family. We were working and we got a call from the two senior sister missionaries, the ones mentioned in the previous story. They were at this family's house at this time trying to get their genealogy done, but they couldn't understand a word of what was being said. So we headed over there. As soon as I walked in, one of the Omas turned to me and said, "Oh, English. They don't understand what I say." The, the West Africans did speak their own dialect, but they also spoke what we might call broken English with I would just say maybe with a strong accent. And I can say I was given the gift to interpret tongue, specifically the tongue of the West Africans on my mission. When they spoke, they might as well have been speaking Idaho hillbilly because I understood everything that they said. I never spoke their language, but they always understood me. I sat down and proceeded to translate for the family as the two sister senior missionaries filled out the record sheets. Some of the hilarious confusion arose when one man of the house was trying to explain that he was married to two different women. The senior sisters didn't understand that they were two different women because they had the same last name. I looked over at him and said, "Sisters?" And the entire family erupted in laughter and said, "Oh, English. Yes, sisters." And then I said, "Married at the same time?" To which the family behind him is crying in laughter as these two white senior sister missionaries sit at the table with shock and horror in their faces. The man who didn't know his age because they didn't have birthdays, he was an old man. I'm an old man, English. I am an old man. Even he was now blushing at this point. So I translated the message, and this man's record was filled out. Most of his family, including all of his wives, were now dead. And as he was going through the list of all the people who had died in the war in Liberia, he could see that it was hurting me to hear this. And he put his left hand on my right shoulder and he said something like, "Oh, English, it okay. It okay." And even in a moment like that, with so much pain, he was trying to make me feel better. Things we can learn from this: the gifts of inspiration, revelation are real. The gift of the spirit of wisdom is real. The gift of the interpretation of tongues is real. If you know you have received revelation and inspiration, even if the keys above you seem hesitant or hostile to the ideas, be courageous. Present the information anyway, and then just stand back, have patience, and let the decision rest with the keys. It seems as though those who have suffered the most in life truly are the most empathetic and caring people around. Man, well, that is that's interesting. Micah story number 19. In Wilmington, Delaware, I was doubled in, meaning two brand new elders. For those who are still not sure about what that means, with an elder who had just spent the last 3 months being trained by the same person who trained me. He had been on his mission 3 months and hadn't baptized a single person, which was and is common for a lot of missions or missionaries. But I promised him that we would get a baptism this transfer, and he was hopeful but was struggling with belief, meaning he really wanted to baptize and did long for it, but he wasn't holding his breath. That was his current state. I felt inspired to do something I've felt inspired to do something that I've done ever since, even being home for my mission. If the others want to work with me, I do this. I went out on the first P day and I bought a bottle of sparkling cider. The stuff that comes in a wine bottle, has a cork, comes in flavors like apple or peach, and is non-alcoholic. And I put it up high on a shelf in our apartment. And I told him to look at it. And I told him, we will open that when you get your first baptism. In the weeks that followed, which were tough, I had just come from West Philadelphia, which had in it one of the best bishops I had ever been graced to shake hands with in my entire life, while Wilmington, Delaware had one of the worst bishops that I've ever had the misfortune of having to work with. We had a lot of opposition, struggle. There were a lot of days we both felt like giving up, but having that bottle there as a physical reminder kept us going. We got our baptism lined up, and we spent an entire week trying to find somebody in the ward who would give this individual a ride to her baptism, and we couldn't find anybody. Oh man, that ward was awful. I called the bishop. I asked him what was up, and he said, I told the members that if she can't find a way to get to church on her own, she shouldn't be baptized. Oh man, the contrast between those two bishops is just insane. It just so happens that this was one of the few areas in my entire mission, two, that I had a car. You guessed it. I broke mission rules. We drove this individual to her own baptism. There were about 20 people there, and all of them asked us, who drove her? Do you understand this? 20 members showed up, being told not to drive her, showed up, and then wanted to know who drove her. We told them the Lord drove her. Shortly after her baptism, a miracle took place, and she acquired a car. She said at the time, I know this is against your rules, but I know I need to be baptized, and no one has ever done anything like this for me. That night, the bottle was opened, and to this day, thinking back to that moment in that apartment, I can still vividly remember the feelings of gratitude that I had, that I, in some small way, was able to help or facilitate or take part in this experience for this individual and for my companion who did the baptizing. Things we can learn from this: the power of visual reminders and the power of hope. It's easy to get sidetracked, it's easy to get overwhelmed, but hope truly is an anchor for the soul. Celebrate the good times. Sometimes we chase the next plateau too intently, and we miss the opportunities at each plateau to take a breath, look out over the horizon, thank God for how far you've come, and celebrate. The power of the keys cannot be understated. The effects of a righteous priesthood holder with keys on a branch, ward, or stake are visibly seen, and the effects of a key holder who buries the talent are also painfully obvious. Are you doubling or are you stagnant? Look to the keys for the answer and look to the parable of the talents for the ending of that story. When ye are under the Spirit, you're not under the law. I know because I am the letter of the law kind of person. I don't even have a parking ticket. The importance of being exactly obedient. But I also know that when the Spirit tells you to do some things differently and you feel comfortable reporting that decision to the keys above you, which I did, you follow through on those promptings. And my mission president was also a very letter of the law guy. And when he heard that, he was more upset at the bishop than anything else. Anyway, Micah's mission story number 20. This is it. This will end it tonight. And then I'll do part two, part three as I go through this. Maybe I'll even do two this week. Maybe I'll get this whole thing done this week. I'll burn through all of my 2026 things in a couple months. That'd be crazy. I'll have like 6 of these done. So when I was in North Philadelphia, I baptized a lady and her special needs son. This was the story of the lady who fed us with the genealogy book. She wanted her son to be baptized with her, even though her son was not accountable. We asked our mission president and had to learn the rules. And we were informed that such individuals do not require baptism, but if the parent desired it, then it is on the parent's discretion once they are over the age of 8. Fast forward to Wilmington, Delaware, the same area with this just awful bishop and members. We are teaching a convert going on a dozen years, seeing how she is doing, teaching her missionary lessons, etc. Something that I learned to do. This was self-taught when I got into a new area. The very first thing I asked for was a list of all the members of the unit, and I would ask for any converts or part member families to be highlighted, and then I would make it an effort to go visit them as quickly as possible. This lady, great strategy, by the way, to really get lessons, really get into a new unit. This lady was one such individual. While we were over there having a lesson, I felt prompted to ask the lady when her young teenage daughter was baptized. She looked over at me in shock and said, I've been told for years that I'm not allowed to get her baptized. And I said, Oh, why? And she said, Well, because my daughter is a special needs kid. Due to the experience I had already gained on my mission, I was able to practically quote the handbook to her. This lady actually began to cry because it was something she had wanted so bad to be a part of, but was denied the opportunity. We told her exactly the rules. They don't need to be baptized, they don't need baptism because they're not accountable. But if a parent desired to be a part of that process, desired the baptism, then that is on the parent. She made it very clear that is something she desired. And we told her to pick a date and we would take care of the rest. For over a month, we had battles with the ward about this baptism. A month. The bishop actually called my mission president, and my mission president read him the handbook. The home teacher of this family came up to us, me specifically, accused me of only caring about baptisms and pushing these people into baptizing the daughter. To which I told him that the mother requested it. And she told us that she had requested it before and she had been turned down. I told him, so if you believe that I'm pushing her into something, go talk to her. My companion, over the weeks, built a strong rapport with this lady's daughter. And the lady wanted and asked my companion by name, please be the one to baptize my daughter. This lady planned out the entire baptism. She had special outfits for her daughter, the whole 9 yards. My companion went down into the water and baptized her, and it was a beautiful experience. As my companion and the daughter were getting changed, obviously with the mother, the wife of the home teacher now marches right up to me, sticks her finger in my chest, actually pokes me, and says, she shouldn't have been baptized. And if she was to be baptized, my husband should have been the one doing the baptizing because he has been her home teacher for years. She even swore at me as I was explaining to her that the mother had requested my companion because of the rapport they had built. I asked her if it would be all right to take the conversation out into the hall so everyone didn't have to hear it, but she refused and then sat back down with her husband. Thank goodness this lady didn't hear any of this, and they came out happy as ever, and we concluded the meeting. When I told my companion what had happened, he, my companion, Elder Manu Male Una, he doesn't, I don't care if he cares if I name drop because he was a stud. He was over 6 feet tall. He was Samoan. His dad played middle linebacker for the Chiefs. His brother was currently playing middle linebacker for the NFL. I told him this. He was ready to go brawl this lady. I had to calm him down and remind him that there was a sparkling cider at our home with our names on it, and the Lord was happy with what we had done. I regretted telling him there. I was like, oh, I made a mistake. I made a mistake because I'm a pretty thick kid. I think I'm pretty strong, but I don't think I'm holding back this Samoan. So as soon as I told him, I was like, I have made a mistake. I have made, I have made a mistake here. But anyway, we got him calmed down. I should have waited till I got home to tell him this. So things we can learn from this. First, seek to obtain my word before you share my word, i.e., before you teach church doctrine and procedure or policy, you might want to make sure you know church doctrine and procedure. The Lord gives us experience, which opens up doors for us later on in life that we don't even see coming. The church is true collectively, but not individually. All branches, wards, etc., are not created equal. If you are going through a tough time in a unit, it is very well could be the unit. If your unit is doing exceptionally well, don't assume all units are like that, and don't assume that when the keys change hands that it will all stay the same as it is. Don't take it for granted. Don't take it for granted. Another thing you can learn is that you can get a lot done in the service of the Lord. You can be an actual fulfillment to miracles versus simply being a bystander to them, so long as you don't care who gets the credit. If all you're interested in is the glory, the praise, standing in the water yourself, etc., you will find, looking back at your life, that you accomplished very little. But the few things that you did accomplish, you made sure everyone knew about it. The contrary to that is looking back at your life and realizing that the Lord, through you, accomplished countless miracles, and only you and the Lord know about it. All right, I'm going to stop it there. That's part. This will be part one of teaching for edification, and next time we're going to go into the purpose, and we're just going to go down from there. As I finish this, I'll read the sections out, and we will go through the entire teaching for edification series. And once again, now that we got this on this other YouTube channel in this format, it enables me to not have to worry so much about what's going on all the time, like on Tuesdays and Thursdays and so forth. So whenever I have time, I can hop on and I can record these. I record them live, not because I expect a ton of people to be listening or at random times, but because it's just easier for me to record live because I can just click live and go and end it. And so that's why I do that. Um, so throughout the week, don't be surprised if you see the Golden Plates has gone live, the two's gone live because I'm just going to be recording more of this. It's not that big a deal, right? You don't have to listen to it live to enjoy it, so you can always listen to it later. Two times speed is how I roll, and it'll be up there. It'll be in my archives, and Ash will be putting this stuff on the website as quickly as we get it. And Steven is really helping out formatting all of this into an audio format as well, and so that's going on Spotify, which has been very useful as well. So I shared this with you, this first section in Jesus' name. Amen. I'm grateful for the opportunity I had to do that, man. Going through some of those memories was awesome. So, all right. I think that's it. I don't think any questions there. God bless. Godspeed, brothers and sisters. Keep the faith. I'll talk to you again soon on part two.